Dear listeners, we are planning to make a few changes to our channel and videos, and we need your help. We'd love to hear your thoughts and suggestions on how we can improve. Please share your ideas and suggestions in the comments section below. Don't forget to drop a hi if you are here. It's a simple question, I said to Allison. Her eyes wouldn't meet mine, though, and that gave me the answer. How long have you known? She fidgeted. How long? I said, my voice getting louder. It became pretty obvious about 6 months ago, she mumbled. When was he born? Ali shot me a what does that matter look. His birth date, I said. When was it? August 17th last year, she said. I did the math in my head. Yeah, it was only too possible. Kristen had been visiting her folks for much of December that year, the last month of our marriage, and she'd probably been screwing Randy the whole time. Still, it was entirely too possible that the boy was mine. Why didn't you tell me any of this? A tear formed in Allie's eyes. I am sorry, she whispered. I should have said something. I know I should have, but I was. I don't know. She's really scared you'll do something is all, and she's my cousin. Which makes me what? Your piece of shit that you don't owe any loyalty to? Just the stupid shithead you can keep in the dark? No, she cried. I love you, Tyler. I've always loved you. But she's my cousin. We're close. You know that. She was right. They were close. But that didn't make any difference to me. If her loyalties were torn, she should have told me. Please say you forgive me, Ali pleaded, tears now streaming down her face as she reached over and tried to pull me to her. I held her off. What has Kristen told you? I demanded. She doesn't know, Ali said. She's afraid. Afraid you're the father and you'll find out and do something. Afraid Randy will find out and leave her. Why would he care? He knew the risk when he married her while she was pregnant with a kid that could have been mine. Because she can't have any more babies, Ali said, sniffling as her tears subsided and a sad look took over her features. There were complications. When Ben was born, she had to have her tubes tied, and Randy wanted kids, 2 or 3. If he finds out this one isn't even his hill, well, it wouldn't be good. I nodded. Kristen could be well and truly screwed. She could lose her newfound love over the mess she'd gotten all of us into. I stood and walked to the door. Please don't go, Tyler. Please. I stopped at the door, my hand on the doorknob. Please, she kept pleading, her sobbing getting louder and more urgent. I opened the door and left without looking back. I flew to Florida early the next morning. Susan met me at the gate and gave me a big, crushing hug. I thought you'd look happier to see me, she whispered into my ear. Sorry, I said, forcing myself to smile. Something's come up. She nodded. Marissa told me. My eyes narrowed. Told you how much? Just that you may have a son you knew nothing about. I nodded. Let's go. We can talk in the car. She smiled and took my hand, tugging me along behind her to the parking garage and her car. So what do? I finally said as we breezed along the road. About what? My son. What do you want to do? I thought about that. Such a deceptively simple question, but really the crux of the matter and a whole lot harder to answer than you'd think. I suppose I'd like to know if he's even mine. Good idea. So how do I do that? Well, she said, watching the road but biting her lip in thought. I suppose you file a paternity action up in Illinois, or you register the Florida divorce case up there and reopen the case. I nodded. Not really my kind of thing, Susan continued. Never done a divorce or anything like that. I sighed, knowing what I'd be doing. I'll call around to some people we have up in Chicago, Susan said, reading my mind. See who they recommend for these things. Thanks, staring at the scenery. We drove in silence the rest of the way to Natalie's office. So this is the great Tyler Collins, a tiny, 60-ish woman with immaculate makeup, too much jewelry, flawless business suit, and a deep, raspy voice boomed as I walked into the lobby with Susan. And you're Natalie, I said, extending my hand. Oh no, sugar, she said, pulling my hand toward her and enclosing me in a hug. I don't get to hug too many good-looking men these days. Not letting this one go to waste. She hugged me to her, and I could smell the smoke from a million cigarettes in her pores and clothing. I hugged back. You're just as handsome as Susan said you were, Natalie said, breaking the hug. Maybe even better. I smiled. It wasn't often I had a 60-year-old chick hitting on me in front of a former lover and a leggy, 20-something receptionist with a rack from Playboy. The receptionist just ignored Natalie, though, apparently used to such displays of affection. Susan only laughed. Well, Natalie said after eyeing me up and down, the contracts? I prompted. Okay, she said, mock disappointment in her tone, but nervous excitement throughout her body. Hell, she was practically rubbing her hands in glee at the thought of what we were about to sign. The three of us went into a conference room. Natalie motioned me and Susan to adjacent chairs, and she sat across from us. "Here we go," she said, opening a folder and pulling out thick documents with sign here tags stuck throughout. She slid them across the table to me. "You've seen these?" I said to Susan. She nodded. "They're fine." "Okay," I said, and spent the next 10 minutes flipping through the various documents while Susan explained the terms of the documents I was signing. "Did you even listen to me?" Susan said when I finished. "Not really." She frowned, and I turned to Natalie. "These the terms you told me on the phone?" "Of course," Natalie said. "And they're good terms for a first-time author?" "Great terms." "Then what's to worry about?" I said to Natalie. "I've got the two of you covering my back, and I am free to figure out how to give them another book." "Within 6 months," Susan said. My eyes opened wide. "That's in there somewhere?" She threw up her arms in exasperation at my nonchalance. "How far along are you?" Natalie asked. "Almost done with the outline." She nodded. "Shouldn't be a problem then, right?" I smiled. "No, I'll get it done." We spent the next hour discussing other technical details I didn't really give a shit about. There was a book tour to discuss, the talk show circuit if it took off as expected, what authors to read the book up front and make nice comments for the dust jacket, the cover illustration, and all manner of arcane things associated with the book. I spent most of the time nodding and agreeing with Natalie's suggestions. Then, before I knew it, the meeting was over, and Susan and I were back in her car and heading somewhere for lunch. "Okay," she finally said as the waitress took our drink orders and left us alone. "Okay, what?" I said, my eyes staying on the endless ocean outside the windows. "The way I see it, you can play this thing 3 ways." "Play what thing 3 ways?" "You can do nothing," she said. "Just always wonder if he's your son." I shot a look at her, not wanting to discuss what had been screaming through my mind since Marissa first suggested the possibility and Allie all but confirmed it. "Or," Susan plodded on, ignoring my glare, "you can file a lawsuit, get a paternity test, and, if he's yours, you can get visitation and pay child support." Child support, by the way, is going to be a lot given all the papers you just signed. I started to protest that money didn't matter that much, but she got her last point out before I could squeak more than the first syllable. "Or you can do the paternity test, and, if he's yours, you can then do nothing. Maybe she'll just agree to it." I shook my head. "That one's out for sure." "Why?" "Because I can't know that I have a son out there, and then just leave it at that. You know, just abandon him to her and that scumsucker." She nodded. "So what's it gonna be?" "It's not that simple," I said, my voice getting louder than I expected. "Yes, it is," Susan said. "It is that simple, Tyler. You either leave things as they are and always wonder, or you find out and deal with it once you know. A or B. Which one do you choose?" I thought about it, staring at the ocean and knowing she was right. "Well," she said as the waitress brought the drinks. "B," I said. "It's B. I've got to know." She nodded, smiling as she did so. "Good boy." Then she flipped open her cell phone and called her office. "Yeah, it's me," she said when the other side answered. "Get on the phone to our Chicago office and get me some referrals in family law for her. Just a sec." She covered the speaker and looked at me. "What county you in?" "Lincoln." "Lincoln County, Illinois," she said back into the phone. "Try to hurry and call me with names and phone numbers the second you've got them." "Okay, sure. Thanks." She flipped the cell phone shut. Now, spreading her napkin in her lap, "Can we relax and enjoy lunch?" We did, my mind settling now that something was being done. By the time I was boarding my plane home 3 hours later, I had the names of 3 attorneys in my pocket and an appointment scheduled for the next afternoon with the only Grant City attorney on the list. "You take care of yourself, Mr. Best-Selling Author," Susan said, leaning in and giving me a chaste peck on the cheek. "You too, Hotshot Florida Legal Eagle," I replied, hugging her tight and knowing our relationship would forever now be that of attorney and client. "So," James McNally said, looking up from my Florida judgment of dissolution of marriage and fixing me with his gaze, "you think this boy she now has with Walters may be yours?" I nodded. "Based on what?" "He was definitely conceived while we were still married," I said. "Were you separated?" I shook my head. "That came about 2 or 3 weeks later." He nodded. "And you had, relations with her during this time?" "Once," I said. "And Walters?" I shrugged. "Not a clue." "Was there a chance they were together?" "I'd bet the farm on it. She was up here for a few weeks around that time." And they were married by the time the boy was born? I nodded. Was she showing when you saw her at the divorce hearing? I thought she had just put on some weight. He nodded, staring at me while the gears in his mind whirred through whatever legal things needed to be considered. There are more, he said. He looks like me, I said. Light-skinned, blonde hair, blue eyes. And Randy's. Yeah, I said. None of those. And neither is Kristen, except for the blue eyes. Her hair's from a bottle, and she's darker toned. Okay, he said, leaning forward. You thought this through? Completely. You understand that you could be paying a ton in child support? Especially now with this book thing coming up? I don't care, I said, getting angry that everyone seemed to think this was all about money. Settle down, he said. My job is to point out all aspects of the situation to you. You make the decision, but it's damned well going to be an informed one, okay? Okay, just do it. He smiled. It was a bright smile displaying perfect teeth and accentuating the dimpled chin. A movie star smile by a lawyer in his mid-40s, still with movie star looks. You a shark? I said, not trusting just the good looks to get this done. When I need to be, he said. Meaning? Meaning you don't always need a shark. Sometimes you need a negotiator. I shook my head. Not with her. With Kristen, I need a shark. We'll see how it plays out and deal with it as it comes, okay? I wasn't sure, but he seemed confident. Let's find out if he's your son before we do anything else, okay? That made sense, and I relaxed. Deal. Good, he said. We spent the next 20 minutes going over the terms of representation, anticipated costs, and getting together the information that he needed to file the lawsuit. When we were done, he looked up at me. Let's not sit on this, he said. I can have this ready tomorrow morning for you to sign. You swing by around 8, and I'll get it filed when I go to court. My look did little to hide my surprise, and he laughed at the reaction. It's really just a few simple documents to get it started, he said. The more intense stuff doesn't really come into play until we get them served with summons and get them into court. Them. Randy and Kristen, he said. They're both gonna have to be named as defendants because they're married, because the boy was born during the marriage, and because Randy's name is undoubtedly on the birth certificate. I hadn't realized that, but it certainly made sense. Still, it wasn't going to be any fun suing a local cop for paternity of the kid the cop thought was his own flesh and blood. No more going even a fraction over the speed limit until all of this was done. And you don't mind? I said, suing a local cop and all? He shrugged. Why should I mind? He's not going to do anything to me. Or you? Really? If he does, you let me know and I'll deal with it, okay? Fair enough. The next morning at 5 to 8, I swung by McNally's law office. It took all of 3 minutes to review the complaint and sign it. On Sunday morning, 2 days later, the shit hit the fan when Kristen and Randy were served with the lawsuit. It was 10:30, and I was in my room revising the completed outline to make it darker and more turbulent. After working for 11 days with Marissa, it was all coming faster than the first time around. Take my newfound learning and ratcheting up tension and combine it with the newest crisis in my life caused, once again, by Kristen, the goddamned love of my life, and the outline was getting darker by the moment. You scumsucker! I heard Kristen scream from somewhere outside. That was followed by pounding on the door and more obscenities. I saved my outline and backed it up, then went downstairs to answer the door. Dad beat me to it. Will you settle down? He was saying to her. She'd have none of it. He's trying to ruin me, she screamed. My marriage. Just because I left him for Randy. He's never gotten over it, and now he's trying to ruin me. Bullshit, Dad thundered, and she froze in fear. No one, especially her own father, had ever spoken to her like that, and she didn't know how to handle it. I paused at the top of the stairs to watch for a moment. He's trying to find out if you've stolen his son from him, Dad continued, trying to get his anger in check. My grandson. That's what he's trying to find out, and you goddamned well know it. But he's no right to. The hell he doesn't, Dad thundered again, as mad as I've ever seen him. If that's his boy, if that's my grandson, he has every goddamned right in the world to know it, and to be a daddy to him. The shock was now permanently plastered on Kristen's face. Her mouth was moving, but no words were coming out. And you, Kristen, Dad said, pointing his finger only inches from her face. You had no right to keep this from him. You know that. So don't you come here witching and screaming that Tyler's done anything wrong, because we both know that's a load of shit. You're just pissed off that this perfect little world you've set up for yourself, a world based on lies and your own goddamn selfish little needs, you're just pissed off that that perfect world's about to explode on you. Her eyes found me at the top of the stairway, and her face was pleading with me to save her from Dad. I only raised my eyebrow in response. Is he wrong? I said, walking down the stairs. Are you sure that boy is Randy's? When she said nothing, I tore into her. You know goddamned well that Ben may be my son. You've already shared that with Allie. Her face turned to horror at the realization Allie had spilled the beans. Oh, don't worry, I said, sarcasm dripping with every word. Your precious family didn't tattle on you until I forced Allie to fess up. But, Tyler, she stammered, her head swiveling from Dad to me and back again, at a loss on how to deal with two men, not one, but two, talking to her in this manner. And you've suspected for more than 6 months, I continued. 6 months, and you didn't say a goddamned word. But the doctor, she protested. He said that babies don't darken, their pigment doesn't really show up for a year or more. And he's a year old now, I shot back. It hasn't darkened even 1 iota, has it? Her face told me the answer. It also told me she'd long ago realized the same thing. I wondered how many nights over the past year she'd laid in bed, praying the next morning Ben would be just a shade darker, his hair turning from blonde to brown. So were you ever going to tell me? No, she whispered, her face dropping to the floor. Just hope and pray he'd never find out? Dad shot in, his disgust at the notion dripping from every word. Yes, she said, unable to look either of us in the eye. And now you're all pissed off he found out, Dad said, waving his hand in disgust, turning and walking away. Haven't you done enough to him for one lifetime? You try to steal his son, too? I said nothing, just watched Dad go into the other room before turning back and looking at the fidgeting Kristen. Have a seat, I said, waving my arm at the sofa and Love's seat. She shuffled over and sank into the sofa, staring into her lap and saying nothing. Can you tell me what I ever did that was so wrong? I said, sitting across from her and leaning over. I mean, I loved you more than life itself. And you repay that by leaving me without a word, without even the courtesy of an explanation. Jesus, you blow me off, leave me, move back here. And you can't even tell me what the hell I did that was so wrong? What did I ever do to deserve this shit? Nothing, she mumbled. It wasn't you. Then, I continued, on a roll now. Then I find out from Mom and Dad that you're getting married before the ink on the divorce papers are even dry, and that you're pregnant, and that you've been screwing him all along, while we were still married. I deserved that? What? Your complete contempt? Was I really that bad? She started to speak, but I wouldn't let her. Then, I hissed, my editor has dinner with me to celebrate the completion of my first novel, and she's the one who has to point out to me that your son is probably mine and not Randy's? And then Allie confirms you've had the same thoughts for months, but you were afraid I'd find out? She looked at me, anguish twisting her face. What, Kristen? Tell me. What the hell did I ever do to you? I never cheated on you. I busted my butt to give you everything you ever wanted. You weren't there for me, she sobbed, the dam bursting and tears spilling down her cheeks. I was all alone, didn't know a soul, and you were always gone. That's what. I was lonely. And then, when I came home, I wasn't lonely anymore. And you wouldn't listen. You wouldn't cut back. Bullshit, I thundered, causing her to shrink back and wrap in on herself. I just didn't kiss you, but every time you demanded it. You knew how much I'd have to work before we moved there. You knew how much I'd have to keep earning when you wanted your perfect house. And your shopping sprees. And those goddamn designer purses for your mother, and Scylla at Christmas, and the golf clubs for your old man. You could have gotten a job or made friends or done anything to help us out, but you wanted it all without having to work for it. Without me having to work for it so I could always be there to dote on you. You wanted $1 million to fall into my lap so you'd have all your shit and I could stay home and tell you how much I loved you and keep you company. Well, grow up, Kristen. Life doesn't work like that. She was crying openly now, and for some reason that made me feel better. I'd been in enough pain over her for God knows how long. Now I wanted to heap some of that pain back onto her. So how's that working out for you, Kristen? Randy always there for you? Or are the midnight shifts beginning to wear you down? And how's that crappy little 2-bedroom condo holding out with your growing family? The look on her face told me I'd struck a nerve. She'd screwed up and she knew it. Now she knew that I knew, too. Which is worse, Kristen? I said, leaning in. Never seeing your husband, but having all the shit you can afford, or never seeing your husband and living in a crappy little apartment and shopping for clothes at the Salvation Army? At least I've got my family now, she yelled back. And my son. Not for long, I warned. And not if I have anything to do with it. You wouldn't, she gasped, horror stretching her features. You wouldn't take Ben from me. He doesn't even know you. And whose fault is that? I shot back. And how do you think a judge is going to view that? You hiding my own son from me? Don't you even think about it, she hissed. You'll never take my son. And what about Randy? I piled on. How's he gonna take it when he finds out Ben isn't his? What, with you not being able to have any more children and all? Screw you, she spat. Been there, done that, I said, standing and walking to the door. And now that I've done it with some others, you should know that it wasn't even that good. Her jaw flat out dropped, stunned that anyone would talk to her daddy's little princess like that. I opened the door and held it for her. See you in court, Kristen, you and Randy both. She whipped her purse over her shoulder and stormed past me without another word. She got in her car, slammed the door shut, and tore out of the driveway without a backward glance. I was suddenly happy that I'd been such a prick, and sad that she was going to do everything in her power to keep me from my son. The turmoil churning in my guts was replicated in my updated outline, which was finished 2 days later. Funny thing about writing, the more you write, the easier it becomes. You write faster and better with fewer mistakes and revisions. This was particularly the case on my second book in a series. Hell, I knew the main characters so well it was second nature to put the words in their mouths. Since this one took place just 40 miles down the road from my own house in Rockford, Illinois, a town I've been to a million times, was also easier to envision the scenery and the mood, the weather and the beaten-down, abandoned industrial buildings. It also helped that I was devoting 12 hours a day to writing. I got up every morning at 6, worked in the woodshop from 7 to 11, then wrote until I passed out from exhaustion at midnight or so. The pages just filled themselves in, and I was almost half done with the first draft by the time my first court date rolled around a month or so after Kristen confronted me and Dad. Sitting in the busy courtroom, I was amazed anything ever got done in a court of law. The gallery benches were packed with angry, glaring people going through divorces. In the massive area in front of the judge's bench, a gaggle of attorneys were shuffling their papers, feverishly scribbling orders for the judge's signature, and making last-ditch settlement efforts in hushed whispers. Every 3 or 4 minutes, another pair of attorneys, the ones next in a long line waiting to approach, were motioned up by the judge. She was 60 or so, and the boredom of the whole thing was painted on her weary face and sluggish motions. After 20 minutes of sitting in the cramped gallery, I saw James McNally get to the front of the line, whispering to 2 other attorneys. When the case in front of them finished, he found me with his eyes and motioned me forward. Collins against Collins, now known as Walters, Judge Gluth said as I approached. Good morning, Your Honor, McNally said. James McNally for the plaintiff, Mr. Collins, who was present and to my left. Sandra Petrowski for Mrs. Walters, a dowdy, frumpy-looking little lady said. Mrs. Walters is approaching. I turned and watched Kristen squeeze her way between the people crowding the gallery, and I saw Randy glare at her as he started walking forward from the corner of the jury box where he'd been seated. And Robert Hall for Mr. Walters, a middle-aged, short attorney said. And what are we here for, ladies and gentlemen? Judge Gluth said. The attorneys looked at each other, and the other 2 nodded at McNally. My client was married to Mrs. Walters, he said, speaking easily in a conversational tone. Their marriage was dissolved in Florida some 18 months ago. We're moving now to enroll that judgment here and reopen the matter. Judge Gluth waved her hand, telling him to get to the point. Well, Judge, he continued, Mrs. Walters gave birth to a son about a year ago. And you're just now getting around to setting child support? She said. Actually, McNally said, we're not even sure the child is my client's. So what we'd like to do is enroll the judgment and get an order for DNA testing to determine parentage. Screwed up as the situation was, Judge Gluth reacted like she'd just heard McNally recite his shopping list. No reaction, and I mean none. Ms. Petrowski, she said, looking at Kristen's lawyer. Obviously, we challenge their right to ask for any such paternity testing, Petrowski said. Obviously, the judge said. She turned to the remaining lawyer. Mr. Hall? He shot a glance at Randy, who just nodded in return. Well, Your Honor, he said, turning back to the judge. My client agrees to the testing. Oh, he does he? She said, catching the glare Kristen shot Randy before directing it at me, then back at Randy. Judge Gluth pursed her lips, staring at the 3 of us in turn. Any reason I shouldn't grant the request? Judge Gluth said to Petrowski. Well, she started. Let me cut to the chase, the judge interrupted. Is there a scientific chance that Mr. Collins is the father of this child? Petrowski paused, then looked at Kristen, seeking some type of concession. Do you want me to ask your client in open court? Judge Gluth said, leaning over the bench and speaking lower. In more explicit terms, perhaps? Kristen lowered her head. No, Your Honor, Petrowski said, seeing the defeat in Kristen's shoulders. We'll agree to enrolling the judgment and submitting mother and child to a DNA test. Good, Judge Gluth said, sitting back. Get me an order. We all nodded and stepped away. What just happened up there? I asked McNally as we stood outside the courtroom. Randy's right pissed is what happened, McNally responded. You mean? He nodded. She told him she hadn't had sex with you in months. No way it could be your child. And now that she's been forced to come clean, I started. Problems in Pleasantville, he concluded. I laughed. What's so funny? Walters said from over my shoulder. I turned. He was standing there, fists clenched, anger seething from his clenched fists and jaw to the popped and pulsing veins above his temples. What's wrong, Randy? Surprised she lied? Surprised the wife my wife that you were sleeping with lied to you too? Guys, Hall said, interjecting his body between us. Settle down, McNally added, his hand gripping my shoulder like a vice. And what are you gonna do if Ben's my son? I continued, leaning over Hall's shoulder and staring into Randy's face. You gonna leave her? The love of your life? His jaws worked back and forth, and his eyes spewed pure venom, but he said nothing. Yeah, just what I thought, I said. Not a clue. Welcome to the club. I turned back to McNally, nodded, and walked away. So just what the hell is so special about Kristen? What does she have that just turns men to mush, makes them shut up, put up with her bullshit, and beg her forgiveness when she gets pissed because she's called out on doing something wrong? Well, the smoking hot body sure as hell helps. Kristen, even at 30 and after a child, still has the body of a college cheerleader. Or maybe it's the face from a cosmetics photo shoot. Sparkling eyes, slightly upturned nose, and lips that continuously express just the right mixture of playfulness and sexiness, all framed by beautiful, thick butterscotch blonde from a bottle hair. Take those looks alone and most men would be quivering wrecks, putty in her hands to mold and mess with as she pleases. She has more, though. She can be flirtatious, pouty, a bundle of joy and love one moment, and a bundle of pure sexual magnetism the next. And she has this way of looking at men, looking at us like we're the only one for her. I know. She'd fixed me with that look a million times. Sometimes to bend my will, sometimes to avoid my anger, but sometimes just because she wanted to make me happy. Throw into the mix that she's smart and talkative and fun to be around, and you have pretty much a complete package. Her only flaw is that she was a spoiled, rotten child who grew into a willful, spoiled adult not used to being denied her way. If Kristen wants something, she damned well better get it, or there will be hell to pay. Yet, in all our years together, I never suspected for even a moment that she'd just plain drop me like a sack of potatoes to get her way. But poor old Randy sure should have suspected that streak in her. After all, he was only 3 years older than us. He'd known us both all our lives, if only from a distance. He certainly knew she was married when she started flying back home and giving him the eye. And he knew she didn't hesitate to cheat and pout and do whatever she wanted to do. Oh no, he definitely knew all of that. Frankly, I felt for the poor scumsucker. Sure, he'd played a hand in ending my marriage. But Kristen had dealt the cards, not Randy. Kristen owed me honesty, loyalty, and all that other crap. Not Randy. And frankly, had the roles been reversed, I am not sure how I'd have handled it. Let's cut to the chase. We can all hold our heads high and talk about how properly we're going to act if the opportunity presents itself. It's another thing altogether when you're single. Such an incredible beauty makes herself available, and that beauty's husband is 1,000 miles away. Then again, I was still ecstatic that Randy was now going through just what I'd gone through. Hell, if anything, he wasn't going through nearly enough. After all, they'd been shagging for only 2 years or so. Let her do this to you after 12 years. While you're the one married to her. I'd been with her since forever, and she dumped me with nary a thought. And I was way better looking, nicer, and made way more money than that little toad. So take that, Randy. Dad and I were both at the rehab center. I'd been going 3 times a week for an hour or so each time, and Mom's progress was slow but sure. Dad had been there every day for 5 or 6 hours a day, helping with the therapy, and he was still impatient with her progress. She's ready to go home, the doctor said again. But she can barely speak, Dad protested again. That'll just take time and patience and a lot of practice, the doctor said. Her walking. Will it improve? He nodded. Listen, he said. It's not like we're gonna just send her home and that's it. She'll have physical therapy 5 days a week. They'll come to the house for an hour a day Monday through Friday, and she'll have a speech pathologist 3 days a week. The pathologist will work with all of you, her to continue the improvement on her speech, and with you too to practice with her and the like. Then why can't she just stay here? I said. Because the insurance company won't allow it, he said. She's reached the level where it's cheaper for this to happen in your home. Based on what? Dad argued. She won't get as much therapy at home. Actually, she will, the doctor said, pursing his lips as he tired of the conversation. She'll get just as much time per week with the therapist as she's currently getting. You've seen that, Mr. Collins. You're the one helping her with her exercises and such, not the therapist. But we don't have the stuff at home for this, Dad continued. The insurance will pay for it to all be rented and installed, the doctor explained. You'll have everything you need. What if I just paid for her to stay here? I said. The doctor looked at me like I was crazy and didn't know what I was talking about. I've more than enough to pay for her stay, I said. He just shook his head though. You'd be wasting your money. Frankly, she should have been discharged back home a week ago. Why? The environment, the doctor soldiered on. She's more familiar, more comfortable in her own home. Once you get her there, her recovery rate will increase at a pretty steady clip, faster than here. So long as the two of you do what the physical therapist and speech pathologist tell you to do. And I mean everything. If anything, do too much. I looked at Dad, who didn't seem convinced, then back to the doctor. And if her recovery goes backward? One of them will tell us here, and we'll evaluate the best course of action, he said. He paused, looking at both of us. He sighed, but his face softened. He'd been through this with hundreds of unbelieving families before us. Listen, he said. Trust me. You'll see for yourselves. I know it's hard to believe, but she really has made rapid progress here. And we expect her to regain her speech almost fully and most of the use of her right side. There will be some residual paralysis that will never leave, mostly in the facial muscles and her grip strength, but she's really doing far better than any of us had reason to believe possible. All right, Dad said. We'll give it a shot. So when is she being discharged? I asked. Saturday, he said. But that's only 2 days from now, Dad finished for me. We've already got the equipment you'll need lined up for delivery tomorrow. Can someone be there between 9 and noon? I can, I said. He nodded. Good. Then let's get it done. The doorbell rang at 9:30 the next morning. Mornin', Tyler, said the smiling, pudgy face of Denny Koss. Denny, I said, shaking his hand. What are you doing here? Delivery, looking over my shoulder and around the living room. And you're not ready for it. I can see that right now. How much is there? I said. A lot. He pushed past me into the house. We're gonna have to clear a lot of this out, he said, then turned and his face lit up with a cherubic smile. How you doing, by the way? I am good, Denny, I smiled back. It's good to see ya. Good to see you, too. You've been back for a while. I know. Seen you around a couple times. Been busy, though, I explained. Yeah, he said, his face getting serious. Tough break with your mom. Great lady. Thanks. He nodded, then spun and picked up one end of the coffee table and nodded for me to get the other end. Let's get all this stuff over to the side for now, he said. Once we get everything in and set up, we'll see what stays and what goes to the basement, okay? You always do this? Nope, he said, lifting his end of the solid walnut table like it was a feather. But you were my quarterback. Special bond, you know, between a center and his quarterback. I mean, you felt me up how many times a game for how many games a season? He winked, setting the table down. You learned to get attached to your quarterback. I laughed. Well, they were nice feels. Yeah, he said, grunting as he lifted his end of the couch. But you could have bought me dinner or something. But no, just feel me and leave me. The rest of the moving session went that way, laughing and talking about high school and what we'd done since then. I was amazed, and more than a bit ashamed, to learn that chubby little Denny Koss wasn't just a simple mover. Hell no, he owned the company. He'd insisted on this delivery when he saw the address, and he'd intentionally failed to bring along a helper on the hopes I'd be there to help him and we could bullshit about the old days. Why you never show up? He said as we took a seat and caught our breath upon moving all of the equipment from his truck to the house. I shrugged. Been busy, I guess. You know, living in Florida, trying to make a go of things there and all. So did you? He asked. Make a go of it and all? Sure. And all it cost me was my marriage. So I guess you got what you wished for, and it bit you in the butt, huh? Hard, I agreed. Sucks. Yeah. We spent the next half hour setting up the hospital bed and the gadgets and gizmos associated with physical therapy. Then another hour after that was spent rearranging the living room furniture and carrying some of it to the basement. "Well," Denny said, rubbing his hands against his jeans, "this should do for now." I looked around the room, then nodded. "Yep, this should do it. You know," he said, turning and fixing me with an even stare, "a bunch of us get together on Friday nights from high school, and some people we're all friends with that live here now." I nodded. "Anyways," he continued, seeing that I was listening with expectation, "it's at our house tonight, about 6:30 or 7. I know they'd all love to see you." "Kristen ever there?" I said. "A few times," he nodded, his smile turning grim. "Not much, but sometimes." I thought about it. We lived in the same town now, knew all the same people. I couldn't let her run me off. "So what do I bring?" I said. He grinned. "Appetizer and whatever you're gonna drink." "Deal," I said, shaking his hand and trying to palm him 100 in the process. He shook back in an iron grip, then looked at his hand when the shake broke. "Not a chance," he said, laying the bill on the hospital bed. "I covered your butt in high school. I am covering it now." "Then take your wife and kids to dinner with it," I suggested. "I mean, I owe you a lot of dinners, right?" He just laughed. "Not a chance. You're not getting out of all those quick feels for a lousy hundo. I want to be wined and dined." We laughed together, and he took off. I quit writing at 6 and started getting ready for the party at Denny's house. 45 minutes later, dressed in jeans and a long-sleeved white shirt, cuffs rolled to mid-forearm, I pulled into Denny's driveway in a newer subdivision on the edge of Grant City. There were already 10 or so cars parked in the driveway and along the curbs, and I could hear the laughing and talking from around back as I grabbed a case of light and a tray of hummus and pita chips from the backseat. I was greeted with a chorus of Tylers, "Hey dudes," and partners as I turned the corner at the back of the house and walked toward the large deck on which everyone was gathered. "Hey, Tyler," Denny's tiny little wife Dee Dee said, pecking me on the cheek before taking the tray of hummus from my hand. "Beer goes in the coolers over there." I nodded. "Thanks for having me." "Thanks for coming," she said back, looking like she was genuinely pleased at my presence. She'd graduated 3 or 4 years behind us, and all I remembered of her was a tiny little kid with short, tomboyish features. She was still way tinier than Denny, that's for sure, but her features were cute in a pixie-ish way. She'd definitely grown into a beautiful lady. "Keep your skinners off her," Denny guffawed from a group of guys, interrupting my observations. I waved him off with a chuckle and proceeded to empty my case of beer into a cooler of ice. Keeping one back and opening it, I took a gulp and went over to Denny and his group. It was like a high school party, but then it wasn't. Amongst the 35 or so people there, some were guys and girls we'd gone to school with, but there were younger and older faces too. Some I recognized, either by face or name, from growing up in Grant City. A few were from other parts of the country and now called Grant City their home. We all shot the shit for a while, getting to know each other again and learning who was married, divorced, had kids, owned businesses, worked for others, and so on. I was there maybe an hour when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Hello, Tyler." I tensed, knowing this was a possibility. Forcing a smile to my face, I turned around. "Hello, Kristen." The group I had been speaking with shied away from us and dropped their voices to hurried whispers and darting glances. "You get to the clinic yet? Give him your DNA?" I shook my head. "Next Friday." "He's yours," she said, her eyes sad. My eyes narrowed, not sure what game she was playing now. "Can we maybe talk for a few minutes?" she said. "Somewhere a little less, public?" After a moment, I nodded, then turned and walked into the house. We settled on a sofa in the den, closing the door behind us. "I didn't know," she started, her voice low and her eyes on the floor, "but you knew it was a possibility." She nodded. "And when you suspected, you didn't tell me." She looked up at me, her stare vacant. "You ever have dreams?" she said, speaking almost to herself. "Because I used to have them, all the time. And sometimes, if you're lucky, your dreams come true. But then, well, then you learn that those dreams aren't really all they're cracked up to be." She turned and faced me, her eyes focusing in on mine. "So what was your dream, Kristen? Because I can tell you what mine was." "Same as yours," she said. "To be with you forever and ever. To have a family. To never have to worry about money or bills or anything. To live in a big house and have a big family." "Ward and June Cleaver," I said. She nodded. "Ward and June Cleaver," she agreed. "And just when we almost had it, I said, you left me. For him." She looked back at the floor and mumbled something. "What?" I said. leaning in closer. I said I didn't leave you for him. For Randy. I left you for my dream. She looked up, her eyes pleading with me to understand. I didn't think I was getting my dream with you. I didn't think we'd ever have the family and everything. I thought you'd just keep working 100 hours a week and I'd be stuck all alone in that house. And when you started coming back here, I prompted. Scylla told me I didn't belong in Florida, that you were being selfish, keeping me cooped up in the house all day and holding off on starting a family. I nodded. I knew her sister had played a part in this. And my family, she continued, Mom and Dad, they told me how much they missed me and how much I needed to start giving them grandbabies and all. We needed to come back. You never once suggested we sell out down there and come back here, I said, fighting to keep my voice calm. I know, but would you have? Would you've done it? I shrugged. Guess we'll never know now. We were silent for a few moments, and then I thought of something. You know, I said, half to myself, the second I found out my mom had a stroke and Dad needed help, I sold off and came up here in a flash. So I guess we do know, don't we? If you'd have come to me, I probably would have moved back up here. She nodded. That's what I thought. Then why? She thought for a moment before answering. I guess I just figured you didn't really love me anymore. Based on what? I don't know. You were working so much. You wouldn't listen to me as much, spend more time at home and things. And when you got up here, I said, Randy doted on your every word and movement. She sighed, which was answer enough. And now? I asked. He's already filed for divorce. I got it yesterday. Why? I mean, that's jumping the gun a bit, don't you think? He says he feels humiliated. I lied to him, let him think Ben was his and all. And he told everyone else, people he works with and his friends and family and all. And now he's got to tell them all that Ben's not his. That he's yours. Again, we sat in silence for a few minutes. I could tell she wanted to say something, but she seemed pensive. Go ahead, I said softly. Ask whatever you want. She shook her head, and I placed my hand on hers and squeezed. Why, Allie? She said. Was it to get back at me? I gave an inward chuckle. No, not everything's about you, Kristen. I paused, thinking about why I'd been with Allie. Well, I guess it's partly about you. Why? You ask. Because she was available, and I was comfortable with her and attracted to her. Partly, I suppose, because she reminded me a lot of you. But no, I didn't spend time with her to get back at you or hurt you. A year ago? Yeah, that would have been a definite possibility. Now? No. And are you going to give her another shot? She said, her face telling me she hoped not. No, I am pretty sure that ship has sailed. Is it because of me? Because she kept my secret? Yes and no. No, it's not because of you. Yes, because she should have told me. If she loved me like she said she did, she couldn't keep something like that from me. And I am pretty sure she'd have taken it to her grave. It's not her fault, Kristen protested. Yes, it is. She made her bed. Well, what? Can we ever be friends again, Tyler? I thought that over. I don't know. Can you ever forgive me? I paused, confused at the signals coming out. What are you looking for here, Kristen? She looked me in the eyes, trying to smile and failing miserably. You thinking about getting back together? Her nod was so slight I almost missed it. My eyes went wide, and I felt my jaw go slack with what she was proposing. We're back here, she said. Back home. And now we've got a little baby boy together. If you can forgive me, well, I'd listen better. Appreciate you the way I always should have appreciated you. I felt her hand now squeezing mine in return. The soft, warm skin so familiar on mine. The gentle caress. Say something, she whispered. At least say you'll think about it. I could only nod. Okay, time out here to explain what's going through my addled brain. 2 years ago, the love of my life ran off with no explanation. She married another guy, a guy she'd been screwing while still married to me, and has a baby. Now I find out, first, that the baby's probably, because I am not taking her word for it yet, mine, and second, that hubby number 2 has bolted and she's available again. So now, come to find out she doesn't hate me. She hates herself for leaving, even if her self-hatred is still for only her own misery. And she may want to get back together again. So what do? Do you tell her to screw off? Easy for you to say if she hadn't been the love of your entire life. Even tougher if you add to that our probable child together and forced interaction one way or another for the next 17 years, and the desire to give little Ben a solid family life and proper upbringing. Do you say yes, I want to get back together? Great. Now I just have to wonder which dream she's going to leave me for next. And wonder, for that matter, If she wants me back because of me, or because she's got no better alternatives. Tyler, she said into my ear, her hot breath arousing me and snapping me from my reverie. Okay, I mumbled, wanting to get away from her for a while. Sure, I'll think about it, okay? Thanks, she said, her face relieved. There was no triumph there, I noticed. The Kristen of old would've had a look of triumph, pleased with herself at getting her way yet again. That look was gone, though. Was she genuinely contrite? Let's go back out and meet some people I haven't seen in a while, okay? I said. She nodded, then pulled me to my feet and led me back to the deck. When we got there, I saw Allie talking with a group on the lawn. Our eyes met, then her eyes wandered and saw Kristen holding my hand. Her lips tightened, her eyes again finding mine. Then, in a flash, she turned to respond to something someone in the group said, a smile forcing itself onto her face. I spent the rest of the evening chatting with old friends and meeting new ones. Kristen didn't exactly hover over me, but she was usually at least nearby. At one point I saw her and Allie whispering back and forth as both shot me glances. Just what I needed in my life. Drama. Dad and I got Mom settled in the next day, both spending hours getting things set where she wanted them and doting over her like a couple of clueless clods, which we were. Like I said, I'd seen plenty of Mom since the stroke, but it all seemed just so sad now that she was back home. She was a small, frail pile of skin and bones, dressed in a baggy sweatsuit and sitting in her recliner. 58 years old, but she looked 20 years older now. Her hair was a mess and seemed more gray. Her skin was pallid and shrunken, and she could only communicate with halting speech, some of the words slurred and barely recognizable, and pointing with her left hand. Her right arm still lay at her side, all but useless. Come on, I said once everything was where we wanted it. I took her right arm in my hands and did the stretching, strength, and motor skills exercises we were instructed to do with her. And that's how the first day back went. The drudgery of exercise and speech practice while listening to the drone of a televised baseball game in the background. There was one light moment, though, when Dad placed her dinner on the TV tray before her chair. What's this? She said, the words coming out Wasthu-ish. Dinner, he proclaimed, proud of his accomplishments in the kitchen while she'd been away. Pot roast with potatoes and carrots. Really? She said, coming out Willie. The look on her half-paralyzed face told us she didn't believe him. Having had Dad's pot roast at least once a week for the past few months, I had to agree with her assessment. So Mom was clearly still sharp as a tack. On Sunday at 11, the doorbell rang. Kristen? I said, looking at her standing there holding Ben in one arm and a basket in the other. Take him, she said, leaning the toddler into my arms before walking past me and into the house. What are you doing? Dad started on seeing her. I am sorry about the last time I was here, Kristen cut him off. Real sorry. And you were right about everything, and I know that. He nodded, shooting glances from her to little Ben squirming in my arms. I gently bounced my hips and held onto him for dear life. Anyways, Kristen continued, walking past Dad and into the dining room and through to the kitchen, calling over her shoulder as she went. They said at church this morning that Sally was getting home today, and I figured she shouldn't be subjected to bad cooking the first day out. Mom snorted. Too late. Dad frowned, staring from the kitchen to Mom to me. Then he focused in on the wriggling little boy in my arms, and his features softened. Let him down, Dad said, crouching and holding out his arms. I set Ben down, and he waddled over to Dad. Is he? Mom said, her face going from me to Ben and back again, the look of expectant hope lighting up the left side of her face. Your grandson, Kristen confirmed from the doorway, leaning against the doorframe and taking in the scene. Her smile was apprehensive, her body tense, waiting for the inevitable barrage of demanding questions. But none came. Instead, Dad scooped Ben up and carried him to my mother, placing him in her lap. I swear to God, I never thought I'd see her this happy again. Those extra 20 years disappeared just like that. When I turned around, Kristen had disappeared back into the kitchen. She froze when she heard my footsteps behind her. Thanks, I said. This is... I let the words hang, but she got the picture. Her whole body relaxed, and she continued fixing plates for lunch. I am not hungry, I said when she grabbed another plate. She turned to look at me. Really? I said, smiling. Just not hungry. Oh. She seemed disappointed, like her first try at winning me back wasn't going as well as planned. I'll help you feed Ben, though, I said. After all, now that I've got a son and all, might as well learn how to care for him, right? She smiled, pleased at my recovery. A few minutes later, Dad helped Mom to the dining room table, and we all sat for lunch. Kristen sat next to Mom, chatting lightly about Ben and all manner of child-rearing joy she'd experienced, occasionally using her napkin to dab at Mom's mouth. She looked like the Kristen I'd fallen in love with, the sweet, charming 15-year-old who was everyone's favorite. Dad was eating his fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and gravy, sharing every other forkful with a bouncing and very messy Ben, who was sitting on my lap getting half of the food offered him all over his shirt and my pants. "Cute," Mom said, looking at Ben and me, her eyes aglow. Kristen turned and looked at us, and at me trying to wipe smears of potatoes and gravy from my sleeves, and snorted. "Welcome to fatherhood," she said. Then, with no reaction from anyone else, the laughter left her eyes and she looked sad. I only smiled in response. "Looks like I've got some catching up to do, huh?" She tried to smile in response. "Better late than never," Dad said, picking up his plate and taking it to the sink. "You doing okay, Ma?" Mom just nodded, her eyes locked on Ben while she slowly chewed her food. "Kristen," he said. "I am fine," Kristen said. "Let me get those for you." She stood and went to the sink, rinsing off the plate and putting it in the dishwasher before tackling the rest of the leftovers. She'd brought enough for at least 3 meals, and she took her time putting it in the refrigerator and cleaning up the remnants on the counter. I spent the time wiping off Ben's mouth, then sliding over to the chair next to Mom and whispering in his ear, "Grandma, and chicken, and table." Hell, I didn't really know what to say. I just knew Mom stayed bright with him around. When Kristen finished, she turned and froze. This was way harder for her than I thought it would be. It was written all over her face, there for everyone to see. Regret, sorrow, a mask begging forgiveness and wondering why she'd ever done what she'd done. She tried to speak, but ended up clearing her throat. "Gonna get some fresh air," she said, and dashed to the back door and outside. I looked at Mom and Dad. "Come on," he said, holding his arms out. "My turn." I passed Ben over the table and into Dad's massive arms. Standing, I made my way outside and around the house. Kristen was nowhere to be seen, but I smelled cigarette smoke from around the side of the woodshop. "There you are," I said, turning the corner. She was huddled in on herself, sucking hard on a cigarette and trying to keep from crying. "When did you start this again?" I said. She looked at the cigarette in her hand. "Sorry," she said, moving to toss the smoke away. "No, go ahead if it settles you down." She nodded her head a few times, took a deep drag and held it, then started speaking as the smoke came out with her words. "Just never thought it would all be this hard, you know? You hadn't come back. I'd never have to really see you again, right? Would have made it all a lot easier. Never telling me about Ben?" She shook her head. "No, not that. Truth be told, I started realizing what a complete mess I made of things when his hair didn't get any darker and his eyes stayed blue. 6 or 7 months back." She looked at me, trying to read my reaction. I gave none, preferring to listen. She turned back to stare at the woods abutting our property. "I never should have done any of it, Tyler," she said, her voice listless. "Any of it. Never should have listened to Mom or to Scylla. Never should have kept coming back up here and dreaming about what I could have. I should have concentrated on working with what I already had. What we already had." She snorted. "Something funny?" I asked. She looked back at me for a second, then back at the woods. "I traded in loneliness for pure misery." She laughed again, but it was a bitter laugh. "You worshipped the ground I walked on. Randy wanted to screw me. I mistook lust for love. Then, when he found out I was pregnant, he proposed. Still not sure he really loved me, but he certainly loved the idea of having me to come home to every night and having a son and... I don't know." "What? What don't you know?" I prodded. "He wasn't you, okay?" she said, the tears she'd been holding back finally letting loose. "He just wasn't you, and all I wanted was you. I'd have left him in a second if I thought there was a chance you'd take me back. I'd have crawled through 1,000 miles of mud if I knew you'd take me in your arms when I got there. But it was all too late. I'd already ruined it all. Everything. So I just decided to settle with the dream world I'd made up here." "So why now?" I said. "Is it just because Randy's left?" "He didn't leave," she said. "I moved out. Me and Ben. The day after you served me with the papers. That surprised me. So when you were in court? We'd been separated a month. Then why did you? What the hell was that? You contested the DNA testing. You're gonna try to take him away from me," she whispered. I felt my anger rising. "Is that what this is all about now?" "No," she sobbed. "That's what it was about in court. But not now, Tyler. That's not why I am here now. That's not why I am trying my hardest to show you I've changed." She looked at me, her face tear-streaked. some of her hair plastered to the waterworks on her cheeks. You see it, don't you? You know I am telling you the truth, right? I see a scared little girl, I said. A scared little girl who's pissed away her life so far, and now she's worried about losing the last thing she's got. She whipped her head back and forth. No, Tyler, that's not true. I want us to be friends. Even if you never take me back, I still don't want you to hate me. You can. You have every right to. I said nothing, kept my mouth clamped tighter than a tick. I know all about your book, she pleaded. I know you've got enough money to bury me in court, to probably take Ben away from me. I know that, Tyler. Allie told me, and she told me it's real good too. The book, that they think you'll be famous. But I don't want that. I don't want any of it. She turned away and tried to check her tears, wiping her face with her hands and hiccuping with the effort of controlling her emotions. Tyler, you let me keep Ben and I'll never deny you time with him. I don't want any of your money. I'll support him on my own, but I want him to know his father now. I know I was wrong. I know you have no reason to believe me. I know that, but I am asking you to give me a chance here. And you're sure he's mine? Kristen sat on the ground, her back against the workshop wall, and huddled her legs in on herself. When you moved back to town, I was afraid something like this would happen. So I went online, ordered a DNA kit. I got some of Randy's DNA while he was sleeping, and I took a swab of Ben's too, and I mailed it in. There's no way Randy's the father. She looked up at me, seeing the skepticism on my face. You'll understand if I don't trust you on this one, I said. She just looked at me. Who else have you slept with? I said. No one, she replied. Just you and Randy. My whole life, just the two of you. She gave a sad smile. Probably why I wasn't so hot in bed like you said. Maybe I should have read more or rented some of those pay-per-views on the dirty channels, huh? I sat next to her. Well, I said, staring into the woods. I may have been exaggerating my case when I said that. She elbowed me. What? Were you? Overstating your case? Well, she elbowed me again. Okay, maybe a little. A little, she said, turning to look at me. Even with her red, swollen eyes and tear-stained face, that flirtatious tilt of her lips and twinkling in her eyes got me excited instantly. She noticed, her eyes traveling to my lower body and back to my eyes, her right eyebrow raising a touch. Maybe more than a little. Shithead, she said, pushing me over to my side. Hey, I protested, but she just laughed and stood up. Come on, she said, walking back to the house, sashaying her but from side to side as she did so. Time to get Ben down for a nap. By the time we got back into the house, though, Ben was already fast asleep, curled on Mom's lap. She was gently stroking his hair while Dad watched from across the room. Leaving them alone, I went upstairs with Kristen and showed her the new book I was working on. She seemed impressed by the outline, and even more impressed by the story I'd thus far written. A touch of depression hit, though, when she realized the ex-wife character in the story was her. You think that's bad? I said, reaching into the box next to my desk and pulling out a manuscript of the first book. Read this? We spent the next few hours chatting about old times and laughing about people we knew and just enjoying each other's company. There was that elephant in the room, though. The elephant I wasn't sure I could ignore. The doctor was right. Mom's recovery at home was far faster and more dramatic than Dad or I could have imagined. After 3 weeks, she was walking unaided, though still with a limp, and most of the lisp was gone from her voice. Her speech was still halting to the point you wanted to finish every sentence for her, but it was easy to understand every word out of her mouth. Most of that, I think, was due to Kristen bringing Ben by every afternoon. At first, I am pretty sure Kristen intended to use that as an excuse to spend time with me. I was busy writing, though, and could only spare an hour or so during the afternoon to play around with Ben on the floor or feed him lunch or just watch him take a nap with Mom. Once he was down for his nap, I returned to my writing and tried to get the second book done. Then I'd go back down and spend another hour before dinner with my son, and back to writing. All told, my sleep was suffering. Kristen hung around the room a couple days in a row, trying to engage me in conversation. I made it crystal clear that talk was not on the agenda, though, and she quit bothering me. After the first week of this, Kristen only hung around the first hour or so, the time I was spending with Ben, and came back after dinner to pick him up. She seemed more than content to let Mom and Dad have their time with him, the time she'd robbed us of, and I was spending 2 or 3 hours a day with my son while Mom and Dad spent the rest of the afternoon with him. You may have noticed I called Ben my son just now. Well, that's because the DNA test came back only 5 days after I submitted my saliva. He was mine, to the exclusion of all men on planet Earth and even a few other planets thrown in. That made the rest of my lawsuit against Kristen perfunctory, and it was all taken care of around James McNally's conference table. All right, McNally started. I've prepared a pretty simple agenda for this little settlement conference. He passed out a piece of paper to each of us and I read it. He was right. It was simple. 1. Custody. 2. Support. 3. Visitation. There was ample space on the nearly empty page to make notes on each subject. Jammer, Petrowski said, we really aren't ready to discuss all of this and you know it. We don't even have Mr. Collins's full financial disclosures. And he's got a book coming out now. I know that, Sandy, he said. But we can at least get the outline started and then you can tell me what else you need. That won't be necessary, Kristen cut in, looking at me. Kristen, Petrowski said, her chubby little face reddening. No, Kristen said, leaning over the table and stretching her hand across, reaching for me to take it. Not knowing where this was going, I reached across and took her hand, holding it loosely. I wasn't kidding on what I said that day, she said, her voice low, her hand squeezing mine nearly to death. I'm sorry. I know I had no right to keep him from you. It didn't start out that way. I didn't really know he was yours, or even suspect it, until he was 5 or 6 months old. But I have no excuse for not telling you, or at least doing something when I found out. I stared at her, frozen. Her jaw was set, though, like she was trying to hold it all together and not lose it before saying what she needed to say. You have every right to seek custody of Ben, she continued. And I know you have a really good shot at getting that. But I am asking you not to do that, Tyler. Please. For Ben's sake, don't do it. Then what are you offering? McNally said, his voice soft and encouraging. We're thinking, Petrowski tried to interject before Kristen cut her off. If you want custody, Kristen said, I won't challenge it. Just be generous with visitation. Don't keep my son from me. Our son. She was fighting to hold back her emotions, but her steely determination told me the offer was genuine. And now I had something to think about, and about 10 seconds to make my decision. It took nearly a minute before I made up my mind, which had Kristen ready to explode. Joint custody, I said. You can be the residential parent, Kristen. I am not going to take Ben from you, but I want generous visitation. She nodded, brushing the tears away that were now spilling down her cheeks. Okay, Petrowski said, her relief evident. Then what about child support? I don't want any, Kristen said. Tyler will do what's right. I shook my head. $250 a week. And I'll pay for health insurance and medical expenses and set up his college fund. I don't want your money, Kristen said. I can. That's not nearly enough, Ms. Petrowski interjected, turning to McNally. You know that's a fraction of what the courts will give her. Not a dime, Kristen said. I am going to have to insist, I said, ignoring the lawyers and smiling at Kristen. I am not going to have our son living like a pauper because you feel guilty for being such a shit. Okay, Kristen sniffled, half laughing, half crying as her tears subsided. Thanks. Visitation? McNally said. Generous, I said. I think what we have going now is working well, Kristen said, and I want to expand it. But I already see him every day, I said. You've got to see him sometime, don't you? I'm starting a job at the semester break, she said, teaching at the grade school. One of the teachers is going on maternity leave, and they've offered me a contract. So I am hoping you and your folks can watch him for me. You're going to be working? I said, more surprised at that than at the visitation proposal. She nodded, smiling. I know. Too little too late. But better late than ever, right? I was shocked. She was trying. She was walking the walk, not just talking the talk. Holidays and weekends? McNally said. We'll work something out, I said. Just write something up for us to look at, and we can get this done. Kristen, Petrowski cut in, terrified as she watched her ship sinking. You've got to think about this. You're giving up a lot here. Kristen looked at her, a sad and patient look on her face. I've already thought about it, Sandy. A lot. I am doing what's right for Tyler and Ben. I'll get by, and I am not going to take Tyler to the cleaners to do it. I need to stand on my own 2 feet. Kristen turned to look at me, and I was trying to hold back tears of both joy at getting to see Ben every day and sorrow at seeing how much Kristen had changed after the fall of both of her marriages. Tyler would never screw me, she said, speaking to Petrowski but looking me dead in the eye. Then her eyes twinkled, and she spoke to me. As much as I may hope otherwise. I only smiled. I phoned Marissa that night. It was late, nearly 11:30, but she answered awake and alert on the first ring. Yes, she said. Hello, I said in response. Fine, hello. What are you calling for? I want to take you to lunch, I said. Tomorrow. Why? Because of you. I now have a son that I am getting to know. She was silent. Well, I prodded. You don't owe me anything, she said, her voice so low I barely heard the words. But I do. A lot more than just lunch, really. She was silent again, and I was ready to speak when she finally said something. You want I should just come out there? I've got a photo shoot in the morning, I said, somewhere in Lincoln Park, for the book cover. I am going to be there anyway. And well, since I am there and all, and since this is the least I can do. About 1, she said. Sounds perfect. Where do you want to meet? I'll pick you up, I said. That's... I already have your address in my GPS, I said. Got it from Susan. So really, it's no bother. All right, she said. See you then. At 10 to 1, I pulled up, and she was waiting on the curb for me. Marissa hadn't changed since we last met. Still had a huge, impossibly spiked head of black hair, black eyeliner and lipstick, black clothes. She had allowed for the autumn chill with a jean jacket, though. Were you in the mood for? I asked, opening her door for her before scurrying around to my side and getting in before getting ticketed for double parking. Whatever, she said. You're gonna have to help me, I said, concentrating on the narrow street piled with cars on both sides. Not my neck of the woods. Turn right up ahead, was all she said. 5 minutes later, we pulled up outside a place on Halsted Street. Café Babariba. It said on the big sign. And thank God they had valet parking. It was a Spanish tapas restaurant, the kind I'd only been to a few times in the past. Being clueless, I let Marissa do the ordering, and she did well. Small plates of grilled octopus, garlicky potato salad, goat cheese and a light tomato sauce with grilled bread to spread it on. The piles of appetizers just kept coming and coming. All told, it was great, and there was enough to feed an army. Marissa, of course, loved it all, demolishing every bite on every plate with gusto. I'd have a bite or two, she'd polish it off. And so it went for an hour. We spent the time catching up. School was going well for her, and she was actually starting an outline for a novel. An idea that popped up while I was working with you, she said cryptically, then said no more. Instead, she steered the conversation around to me and the book and the photo shoot for the book cover I'd endured that morning. Do you really think that's appropriate? A voice screeched from behind us as our meal neared the end. I turned to see two 70-somethings with blue hair and doddering, glaring husbands standing near our table on their way out. They were staring with hoity-toity distaste at Marissa and her outfit. Have we done something to offend you? I said. The look they gave me was like they just stepped in a pile of dog shit. This is a nice restaurant, one of the men said, looking at Marissa with his nose twitching. And I would have expected the patrons here to have better manners, I shot back. Apparently that's not something they check at the door, though. The ladies gasped, the men glared, and Marissa snorted. If it would help, I continued, we can try to do something a little more inappropriate to offend you some more. Like interrupt your private luncheon with our snotty attitudes. For example, Marissa was covering her mouth with her napkin now, trying to keep her food in her mouth. The crew of oldsters harumphed and put on expensive coats and silk scarves and stomped their way to the door. They managed to stop at the receptionist station and say some hot words, I noticed. I am sorry, Marissa said when I turned back to resume our conversation. About what? She resumed the meal, now quiet and sullen. Will there be anything else? The waitress said, appearing as if by magic. Her looks told me she hoped there wouldn't be, which only got my dander up. Is there a problem? She shot a look at the manager now standing next to the receptionist, then back to me, pleading with every ounce of her energy. I'd like a cup of espresso, I said, and my guest will have something for dessert. Marissa started to protest, her face telling me she just wanted to leave. You pick the dessert, I said to the waitress, and a glass of wine that will go with it, if you don't mind. Why are you doing this? Marissa said as the waitress left. Because, I said, because I am happy to be with you and I am enjoying myself, and I am not going to let a bunch of old scumsuckers ruin our lunch. She nodded, her face softening, and she destroyed the dessert they brought her, too. And so the next 2 months went. Work in the shop in the morning, see Ben for an hour or two a day between writing until 11 or midnight, get up, repeat cycle. Kristen was still trying to spend time with me, showing interest in my every movement. I appreciated her efforts, but just wasn't sure I could ever love her again. The newest novel, which I had yet to come up with a title for, was coming along great and I was nearly finished with the first draft. With all the shit that had happened to me since the first one was written, this one was, if anything, even darker than the original. Tyler? Kristen said, looking up from the screen after reading the outline. Yeah. You still hate me, don't you? Where's that coming from? This book. There's a lot of anger in it. I looked at her, not quite sure how to respond. The silence grew. Then she came over to the chair I was sitting in, leaned over, and kissed me on the lips. Not a romantic kiss with deep probing tongues and all that, but not a chaste kiss either. I am more sorry than you'll ever know, she said. I tried to smile, and she took this opportunity to sit in my lap and put her arms around me. If my folks hadn't been downstairs with Ben, and if it hadn't been so long since I'd had any female contact of any kind, I'd have jumped or pushed her off or something, but I didn't. I know I ruined it, she said, looking into my eyes. I know that, and I hate myself for it. I've been hating myself for quite some time. Tell you the truth. Then why? Because I was a spoiled, rotten little witch, and you wouldn't toe the line, she said. I tried. You know that, right? I thought that was what you wanted. You just wouldn't meet me halfway. She nodded. I know, Tyler. It wasn't you. It was never you. You've got to believe that. Still, I said, absent-mindedly stroking the soft skin of her arms as she held me. Yeah, she murmured. But it wasn't because he was better than you. He represented something better. Something I thought at the time was better. But I never wanted anyone else but you. I was so focused on her words, I didn't even notice the increasing excitement as she started swaying her body against me. You can hate me, she said, her voice softening. I understand that. I would hate you too. I did hate you, actually, when you were with Allie. That had nothing to do with... I know. Still, she told me how good you were, in more graphic detail than I cared to hear. And all it did was make me cry that I used to have you. Try being on my end of it, I said. I was the one that got dumped. Then I find out you were with him before we were. While you were still with me, living with me, not even separated, let alone divorced. She nodded, biting her lower lip. I'd seen this look a million times, and I knew she was close. What are you doing? I said, my voice little more than a hoarse whisper. You hate me, she said. I want you to take it out on me, too. She shuddered. Then what was that? It's been so long, she said. Please. You want me to take it out on you, to punish you, and you just got off on me? And I am still sitting here listening to you? Guilt swept her features, her eyes dropping. I am sorry, she said. Just a minute ago you were all hot and bothered to get me going, I whispered. Why the hesitation? She looked up and there were tears welling up in her eyes. I didn't mean. I thought so, I said, stepping back. After a few minutes of silence, Kristen spoke. You've changed so much. You ripped out my heart and stomped that sucker flat, Kristen. What did you expect? Gratitude? Not all this anger, she said. I am not angry, I said. I just think you're playing games with me. Games I don't have the time or the heart to play. She started to speak a couple of times, but stopped herself. I was content to wait her out. Until about the 6th time, that is. Then my patience snapped. Just say it, will you? I am sorry, she said. About a few minutes ago and all. It's just that, well, I've been thinking about it. About what? You know, kind of a friends with benefits kind of thing. I want to be with you, spend time with you. And if that's the only way I can, then so be it. I shook my head. I did enough of that when we divorced. Enough to last me a lifetime. Then a date, she suggested. Let me think about it. But you've been thinking about it, she said. You've been thinking about it for a couple of months. And every time I bring it up, you just say you'll think about it. Do you want my immediate answer? I said. Her lips tightened at the look on my face and the tone in my voice. Do you ever think you'll say yes? Not to taking me back, just to giving me a chance? A chance to prove how much I love you and how much I am willing to do to make it up to you. I don't know, Kristen, I sighed. I honestly don't know. In early November, I got a phone call from Natalie. 2 weeks tomorrow, she rasped. What's 2 weeks from tomorrow? I said. The party to celebrate the release of your first great American novel. It's a mystery thriller, I corrected her. Oh, don't be modest, she cooed, coughing at the end. It's brilliant, and we've got 4 famous authors to agree with us on that. Really? I said, surprised that the ploy of sending out advances for comments had worked. Who read it? James Patterson, Tammy Hogue, Dennis Lehane, and, get ready for this, Stephen King. Stephen King? Yeah, she said, as surprised and awed as I was. He usually doesn't comment on much, but he really liked this one. To the point where he's maybe gonna be at the party. Really? Really? Then what do you need from me? New suit, she said, and be at the party on the 16th looking like an author, and being really nice to the publishers and everyone else. Okay, I said, then thought of something. Who else is gonna be there? From our group? Well, I'll be there, of course. And Susan, I figured you'd want her there. Of course, I said. And Marissa? Marissa, she said, her voice getting wary. You sure? She's really the one who deserves the credit, I said. You know that. She's the one who got you to look at me, and her editing was, well, it's a way better book. Okay, she said slowly. I'll see what we can do. You don't sound so sure, I said. Don't get me wrong. I mean, a few people know of her. It's just that, you know, none of them have ever seen her face to face. Something like that. Well, she's coming, I insisted. If I have to drag her there kicking and screaming, it'll give her some exposure, maybe help her make some connections. Natalie sighed. It's your party. I'll take care of it myself, I said. You don't worry. I'll take care of everything. You just make sure they don't throw us out when we get there, okay? You're the boss, she said and rang off. The next day at nearly noon, a FedEx driver pulled into the driveway and hauled a big, heavy box to the front door. Tyler Collins, he said. That's me. Sign here. Turning his electronic delivery pad upside down, I scrawled my signature, then carried the box inside. It was 20 copies of Long Gone, my first book. I immediately quit writing for the day, then drove into Chicago to get 3 new suits with all the accompanying shirts, ties, socks, belts, and such. It set me back $8,000, but I was not going to look like a hayseed in the blinding lights of the New York literati scene. My repeated calls to Marissa's apartment had gone unanswered, and I didn't bother leaving a message. Instead, by 5:30, I was camped out on the stoop of her apartment building. I was nearly frozen and ready to give up by 10:30 when I saw the familiar, long-legged gate walking up the block toward me. She was with someone, and they came to a halt at the stoop. Tyler Collins, she said. The tall, skinny kid with her had greasy hair, tight-fitting jeans, and 3 earrings in each ear. He looked like a smack-addicted lead guitarist for a punk rock band. He had a bottle of cheap wine in one hand and a cigarette burning in the other. I tried calling, I said. I've been out, she said. I just need a few minutes. She turned to the guy with her. Get lost. But, now, she said, staring him down. He shot me a dirty look, then did what she said. Hope you've got something to drink with you, she said. He just took my evening's entertainment with him. Come on, I said. We'll go get a drink. Nah, she replied, turning and walking back the way she came. There's a liquor store on the corner. You're buying. I hurried after her, and 10 minutes later she was letting us into her apartment, wine in hand. I bought her 2 bottles to make up for ruining her date. Sorry about the interruption, I said, shedding my coat and standing against the radiator to warm my butt and legs. You should be, she said, her back to me as she reached up and pulled out 2 jelly jar glasses for the wine. I haven't been late in months. I brought you a present, I said, reaching into my overcoat and pulling it out. She turned, carrying the glasses and wine bottle into the impeccably neat living room area of her loft apartment. She looked into my outstretched hand as she passed, setting the bottle and glasses down. Sit, she ordered, pouring the glasses to the brim. I obeyed, holding the book out to her. Mine? I nodded. She opened it. To Marissa, I'd written on the inside cover, "A million thank yous can never repay all you've done to help my dream come true. With incredibly sincerity and appreciation. Love, Tyler Collins." Very nice, Tyler Collins, she said after reading it. You didn't see it all, I said, picking up the book and flipping to the dedication page before handing it back to her. With heartfelt gratitude and great affection, I whispered as her eyes read it. This book is dedicated to the most incredible sisters on planet Earth. For Marissa Key and Susan Karapova. You're a friggin' sap, she said, flipping the book shut and placing it on the coffee table between us. Guilty, I said, but I meant every word of it. She just looked at me, sipping her wine then gulping it down in one fell swoop. Okay, then let's have a little party, shall we? She got up and turned on the sound system. John Coltrane was playing a sax line seeped in melancholy. It's good, she said, sitting back down and refilling her glass. There's more, I said, taking a sip of wine. It gets better? They're having the publication party in a couple of weeks. In Manhattan. And the publishers and probably a lot of authors are going to be there. Maybe even Stephen King. Stephen King, she snorted. Now there's someone who could use a better editor. Jesus, his early stuff was so good, so promising. Now it's diarrhea of the word processor. Still, I said, it would give you a great chance to meet a lot of really big people. Her eyes narrowed as she took in my meaning. I am paying, I said. It's the least I can do. Not just for the book. For helping me get it published. For editing. I took a sip of wine. For my son. She stared at me for a minute, then started laughing. I am serious, I said. I know you're serious. That's what's so pathetic about it. I mean, come on. Can you picture me there? With Stephen King? Maybe John Updike? Get real, Tyler. I slammed my glass down, startling her for the first time since I'd known her. What the hell are you afraid of? Huh. You worried that if you meet these people, maybe make a good impression. You think you'll actually have to join society? This is good for you. For your career. And you laugh at me? You won't let me even try to repay you for all you've done for me? She said nothing, preferring to fix me with a fiery stare as she drank her second glass of wine in one fell swoop. That's a good idea, I said, picking up the bottle of wine and holding it toward her. Get drunk. Dodge your big chance. She let me refill her glass, but took only a sip before setting it down. Then she got up and went to the window, staring outside while John Coltrane's sax managed to set the mood in the dim apartment. Okay, I heard her say. I'll go. I got up and walked to the window. And you'll have fun and try to meet people and be nice? I said, standing next to her and looking down at the dark street below. I'll try. And you'll celebrate the publication of our book with me? It's your book, she mumbled. I took her by the shoulders, feeling her tense up under my hands as I spun her to face me. It's our book. I never could have done it without you. And it would have been a piece of shit without you fixing it. Her eyes stared into mine. Those beautiful, deep, dark eyes with the Asian flair. Then her face neared mine, and her impossibly silky, pillowy lips were on mine. Soft and gentle at first. Then with more urgency as her tongue sought mine and her hand went to my neck and pulled me in closer. I was slow at first, surprised and taken aback. I'd never thought of kissing her, let alone dreamed she'd be the one to initiate anything. Yet, here I was, feeling her body meld against mine. Her urgency conveyed as her hand went to my butt and pulled me in closer to her. Without conscious thought, I was kissing her back and running my hands over her back and through her hair and over her sides. We were, both of us, hungry for each other in a way I'd never experienced. It was frantic, helpless, swept in a tide of suppressed desires I only now realized I'd long felt for her. It had always been there. That's something that just made me want to screw her silly. I knew she wanted this to go the whole way. I knew, too, that I suddenly wanted this more than anything in the world. I fell onto the couch with our mouths still together. Then I felt her break away from me. We only broke our kiss when we climaxed. Then we just held each other. Okay, she said after 10 minutes or so. I'll try to behave myself at your party. Think we can play again? She said. It was good. Really good. Amazing. Actually, I spent the night at Marissa's, spooning into her warm, soft body and sleeping like a baby. I awoke early, somewhere around 5:30, to the sound of a shower. Getting out of bed, I tiptoed silently to the corner of the room and into the bathroom. That you? She said when I opened the door. Expecting someone else? Done in a minute, she said. Wait a sec, I said, quickly taking a leak before going to the shower and sliding back the curtain. Good morning. Morning, she said. Her eyes closed as she rinsed the shampoo from her hair. Even having seen her fully naked scant hours before, the sight of her wet, glistening body before me still took my breath away. At ease, soldier, she said. Sorry. She smiled. Don't be. I stepped into the shower with her. While I could tell you we spent the next half hour having sex, that would be a lie. Instead, she stepped out only seconds after I got in, and I quickly scrubbed up and joined her within 10 minutes in the kitchen area, both of us fully dressed with wet hair. We sat at the table, sipping strong, scalding coffee, neither of us wanting to speak. So about last night, she started after nearly 5 minutes. What about it? Just don't go thinking you'll get a repeat performance is all, she said, her eyes on the cup in her hands. It's just, well, been a while, you know? For me, too, I agreed, staring at her and meeting her eyes as she raised her head. There was a flash of anger there, and I smiled. Still, I continued, that's not why it happened. At least not on my part anyways. Really, she said, her voice cool. I leaned across the table. I am not saying I love you. Hell, I don't even know how much I really like you. Then what are you saying? That I see something there. Something in you that really interests me. A lot. And I want to get to know you better. She harumphed. Seems you got to know me pretty well last night. And, to be honest, I sort of regret that. Why? She demanded. Not what you expected. Better, actually. Then what's so wrong with last night? Because now you'll think I am trying to get to know you better, so you'll give me a repeat of last night. And that's not why I want to know you better. I don't date, she said, her voice soft with a twinge of something. Regret? Insistence? I couldn't tell. Then we won't date, I said. Just sex buddies, she challenged. I shook my head. Friends. I have enough friends already. So what's one more? You really so popular you can't fit me into your busy schedule? She sipped her coffee, staring at me as she did so. You don't even know me, she said. That's the point. I want to get to know you. We're nothing alike, she argued, getting up and refreshing her coffee before refreshing mine. You're... She looked me up and down, her right eyebrow raised. What? A yuppie. So it comes down to clothing? She shook her head. It's more than that and you know it. Really? Like because I wear jeans and dress shirts and you dress like a... Well, like you do? Then that means we can't find out more about each other? Maybe spend some time together? Dinner or drinks or something? You saw what happened when we went out to lunch. People look past you. They focus on me. And they think I am a freak. Then why do you do it? I asked. You know how they look at you. So why do you dress like that? Because it's none of their business, Marissa said, her voice rising. I want them to look at me for me, not for how I dress. And yet here I am, asking to do just that, and you're refusing. So again, why? You wouldn't understand. Try me. She glared at me in response, clamming up. Fine, I said. Then I'll call Susan. You know she'll tell me. Leave her out of this. Not gonna happen. You have no right, Tyler. I know, I said, my eyes meeting hers. Call me selfish. Call me a prick. But I'm gonna find out what makes you tick. One way or the other, I'm gonna find out. You don't know what it's like, she pleaded. I've seen you. The way everyone back in that little Hicksville town looks at you. You were handsome, popular, the golden boy. I was none of those things. What? Growing up? Growing up? High school? College? I was a freak. The tall weirdo with no friends, no money, and no chance of getting either. And so you decided to? I decided to become my own person. I tried it their way, but it got me nowhere. Now I am doing it my way. Okay? And it's going just fine. Oh really? I shot back. Bringing home some scrawny piece of shit every month or so to get laid. Refusing to form any attachments or friendships. That's working out just fine. Screw him, she said, slamming her cup on the table and spilling it all over her hands and the table. And screw you too. She glared, her face on fire with anger and resentment and a million other emotions I couldn't really read. I didn't blink under her gaze. I like you just the way you are, I said, reaching across the table. I don't care if you change one bit. Yeah, right. Say that in 2 weeks. Say that when you and I go to your precious little party and they all look at me like I am some kind of goddamned monster. And you're a nut job because you're with me. I don't care about them. You say that now, but you will. You will care about them. About what they think. And what your parents think and your friends and everyone else. Her voice was pleading now. She was convincing herself that I was no different than the others. Then try me, I said. What have you got to lose? The worst that'll happen is we'll spend some time together, and then it'll all burn out. And you'll be in the same place you are now. But I don't want that again, she pleaded. Don't you see that? How many times do I have to get rejected by someone, by everyone, before I am allowed to just quit trying to make everyone happy? How much pain do you think I should go through? How many times do I need to be treated like something someone stepped in? I'll never treat you like that, I promised. No matter what happens, I know I'll never treat you like that. They all say that. At the beginning, that's what everyone promises. But then they do. So what's the alternative? Go through life in a series of one-night flings and die old, alone, no one to talk to? Or get treated like shit for the next 50 years, she shot back. There's a better alternative. I sat back, sipped my coffee, and looked at her. Marissa was almost frantic in her pleas for me to just let it be. There was something there, something more. A kindness, loyalty even. She'd read my book, a book by a no-name nobody, and seen something. And for me, a total stranger, she'd given up weeks of her life to help. She could say it was because she just wanted to see the book published, or because it was good for her career. If that were the case though, she didn't have to work as hard as she had. No, She cared about people and about acceptance. She just wanted that acceptance on her own terms. I want to take you to dinner, I said. You pick the place. Wherever you're comfortable. Dress how you like. I don't care. I just want to take you to dinner. Her shoulders collapsed at the realization that I wasn't going to give up. Her face dropped to the table, like all the fight was gone. Okay, she finally whispered. I got up and went around the table, kneeling at her side. I cupped her chin in my hands and turned her face to mine, staring into her dark chocolate eyes. We can go as far as you want, I said. You just want to be friends? Fine. You want to maybe see if there's more there? Then that's fine too. Your pace, your choice. Okay. She nodded, her chin in my hand. But I promise, I continued, from the bottom of my heart, I already know you, and I've known you long enough to know what I am getting myself into. So I promise I won't throw you away, okay? Her lips tightened and her eyes blinked a few times, like she was trying to hold back tears. Then she put her arms around my neck and pulled me in for a hug. Okay, she said. Just remember you promised. You seem different, Kristen said, sitting on the back porch with me while we watched Dad pushing Ben on a tree swing. I'd gotten home from Marissa's a few hours before, spent some time with Mom doing her exercises, and now we were all outside enjoying the last of the 50-degree weather before winter set in. How so? Like you've met someone, she said, her eyes avoiding mine. Someone that, well, you're excited about. I was silent, not sure how to answer her. Did you sleep with her? What difference does that make? I said, amazed at her boldness. I've slept with a dozen or so women since you left. What's one more? Because you care about this one, she replied, looking down into her lap before turning to me. Other than Allie and I am not so sure how much you cared for her. I mean really cared other than her. You really haven't fallen for someone since? Since you left me, I said. You can say it. I haven't really fallen for someone since you left me. Since I left you, she whispered. You're wrong, I said. I did fall for someone. Just before I had to come back here. Someone who would have been. I don't know. But it was more than just sex. I can tell you that. And if this hadn't happened with Mom, then who knows? I'd probably be with her. Kristen was silent, seemingly stunned at the realization I'd formed an attachment to someone other than her. Even though she'd left me for Randy and a life back in Grant City, she was nourishing this infantile fantasy about her being my one true love, the only person I could ever be with. What's the big deal? I said, angry at her reaction, just watching my dreams shatter. We were silent for a few minutes, both of us staring at Ben. Listen, I said, for some silly-ass reason trying to cheer her up, I don't really know how serious this is gonna be. What do you mean? I mean she's afraid to get involved and all. Why? Because she's been hurt. Kristen mulled it over, then placed her hand on mine. But you want her to say yes, don't you? I think so, I agreed. I want her to at least try. Do I know her? I laughed. Yeah, you've seen her. She from here? My editor, I said. The girl I was at dinner with that night. The one who told me about Ben. Kristen's eyes widened. But she's a wonderful person, I challenged. Smart, kind, pretty, all around wonderful. Maybe a bit difficult to get to know, but from what I've come to know. Kristen bit her tongue. To her credit, she left my description unchallenged. So you think maybe you're in love with her? She asked. Dunno. But you want to find out? Uh-huh. Without trying? On us? I looked at her, not sure what to say. We'll see how it plays out, I said, then laughed. Hell, if Marissa has her way, it's not going anywhere anyway, okay? Kristen nodded, then tried to smile. But she was afraid, like she was finally getting the point that there may never again be a Tyler and Kristen, that our ship had sailed, and she'd been on deck and left me ashore. On a shore with other women out there I could fall in love with, and who could love me in return. Then Kristen's hand squeezed mine. No matter what, she said, her jaw set with determination. I want you to be happy. I really mean that. And if you can't be happy with me anymore, then I want you to find someone and be happy with them. You deserve it. I nodded. You too, I said, meaning it. You too. She gave a lopsided grin and kissed me on the cheek. Thanks. I was going to give Marissa 5 days, then call her to push for a dinner commitment. On day 3, she called me. You really serious about wanting to get to know me? She started, her voice timid. Never more serious about anything in my life, I confirmed. And about me getting to choose where we go? Deal's a deal. I heard her draw a breath, then she spoke in a flurry of words. Tomorrow night. Pick me up at 5:30. Greek islands in Greek town. See you then, I promised. When I picked her up, she was dressed as always. Think black. Her face challenged me, daring me to say something. You look hot, I said, smiling as I pushed her hand away from the door handle and opened it for her. You don't have to do that, she said. What? Open my door. This isn't the 1950s. I can get it myself. I smiled and shut the door behind her, then went around, got in the car, and put it in drive. I am not asking you to change, I said, paying attention to the street signs as I made my way toward Halstead. Don't bother asking me, okay? We're doing this to see if we can get along. Deal with each other the way we are instead of try to mold each other into our own visions of the perfect mate. She said nothing. Okay, I prompted. Fair enough, she said. And I was serious before, I said. You really do look hot. That's just because you know what's underneath. True, I agreed, then grinned. What? The tattoo, I said, looking at her briefly before turning left onto Halstead. What about it? It's smokin'. A faint smile turned her lips. You really like it? Love it. She seemed pleased with that. After a minute, her hand snaked across the front seat and came to rest on my thigh. We drove the rest of the way in silence, just enjoying the silent company. Almost an hour and a half later, Marissa pushed away her half-eaten plate of baklava. I give, she said, patting her tummy. You're kiddin', right? What? You think I am a pig? I smiled. That's the first time 15 or so times we've been out together. It's the first time you've ever left so much as a crumb on your plate. Just then a waiter hustled to our table. Some Greek guy in his mid-40s, full head of black hair slicked back and a 5 o'clock shadow on his face. He looked at the plate, then at Marissa, then back to her plate. His face turned into a great, broad smile. What? She said. You too? The cooks, he said. I had a bet with them. $50. No way you could eat it, I told them. They bet me you could. Then you win, she said, her lips curving into a smile. $50, he said, then tapped his temple. I knew, you see. She's slowing down, I told them. They laughed and said it didn't matter. Great, she said, pushing herself away from the table. Now everyone thinks I am a pig. Not a pig, he said, placing a hand on her shoulder. Active, high metabolism, good appetite, but not a pig. Oh no, definitely not a pig. He ogled her, the look on his face making it clear he'd like to rut with her, pig or not. I think we're ready for the check, I said, interrupting his stare. He tore it off and slid it to me. I slid 100 under the ticket. His eyes lit up at that. Change, he said, knowing my answer. We're square, I confirmed. His face lit up. Thank you, he said, sliding the check and the bill off the table before hustling away. Thanks, Marissa said, placing her hand atop mine. My pleasure. So what now? I patted my stomach. I don't know about you, but I could use a walk. She groaned at the prospect, rubbing her distended belly. Come on, I said. It'll do you good. So that's what we did. For the next hour, we strolled over the bridge across the interstate and into the loop, commenting on our favorite buildings and the people scurrying home late from the office. We guessed which ones were lawyers, brokers, traders, and the like. An hour and a half after dinner, we pulled into an open parking spot a half block down from her apartment. You coming in? She said. I shook my head. I was serious before. No more of that until we know both of us where this is going. But I want you to come in, she said, taking my hand and squeezing. Really? And you'll behave? If that's what you want, she said. If it's not. She raised her eyebrow at the suggestion left lingering with her words. It's not what I want, I said. I think it's best, though. Whatever, she said, opening the door. So you coming in? I shut off the engine and joined her. Once inside her apartment, just as spotlessly neat as the last time I'd been there. I think she was a touch obsessive-compulsive. We sat on the sofa and listened to more jazz, sipped wine, and talked about books. What was good, what was bad, why, how they did it, and what could have made the good ones even better. Then we talked about our childhoods, families, friends, and everything else under the sun. She was becoming easier to talk with as we became more comfortable with each other, and she seemed to be letting her guard down more and more as our conversation went along. I could get used to this, I said, sipping the last of my wine. What? Me? The jazz? I said. And you. She smiled, then reached for the bottle of wine to pour me some more. No, I said, pulling my cup away. I've been here almost 2 hours, and I've got a long drive. Spend the night, she said, neither suggestive nor demanding. Just that. Just like, spend the night. Where will I sleep? In the bed, of course. Oh, I said, leaning back and looking at her. And you'll behave yourself? Will you? A smile was playing over her lips. It lit her whole face up in a way I haven't yet described. Especially this smile, which had a certain little girl innocence to it. I'll try. Then so will I, she said. Try, that is. Think you'll succeed? Depends on how much more of this we drink. Then let's have just one more, then we'll turn in. I wouldn't want you to assault me or anything. She leaned in close. You sure about that? Sounds kinda kinky. Maybe it's just up your alley. It was my fault. I knew it then and there, but it was her easy, flirty demeanor. I just broke down and leaned in and kissed her. Just a light peck on the lips, but then she was back seeking more. And before I knew it, we were in a full-blown make-out session on her couch. After I don't know how long of this pure heaven, I broke away. Taking a deep breath, I looked at her and smiled. Okay, I said, time for that bed now. She pouted, but her face showed something more. Something like she was glad I'd held off. I wasn't glad, though. I was now fully revved. A couple of times during the night, I found myself reaching toward her sleeping body, but I stopped every time, frustration riddling my hormones. And the next morning I was rewarded for my restraint, while putting on my jacket to leave back for Grant City and let Marissa get her studying done before class. So when's the next date? She said. When do you want? Tonight? And tomorrow? I smiled. Could be a bit tough, with your school and all, and me trying to get another book written. So when? Friday. Time. I shrugged. Depends on what you want to do. Marissa paused, biting her lip and looking at the ceiling. Then she turned to me, her face a combination of challenge and trepidation. I want to meet your friends, she said. My friends? Those people you went to school with. The ones you went and partied with that one Friday. You said they meet most Fridays. I hesitated. There was a strong chance that Allie or Kristen or both would be at the get-together this Friday. It was at Chumley McWhorter's place, and they were both close with Chumley's wife Darla. Is there a reason you're not saying yes? She said. The trepidation was now gone, her face all challenge. I sighed, recognizing her tactics. My anger at the endless challenges, see? You are embarrassed of me attitude, was quelled by the sudden realization of her underlying motivation, though. She was afraid. I saw that. It was in the initial trepidation. She was afraid of where we were going together, and afraid I'd just be another one to throw her away. I smiled, a broad grin. So you're coming back to Grant City? Only if we go to the party, she said, a smirk now on her face. When's your last class on Friday? Don't avoid answering me, she said. I'll cut class if I have to. That's no reason either way. Just yes or no. Well, I continued, I was just hoping you could come in early. I'd really like you to take a look at where I am on the new one, the sequel. Her look told me she thought I was weaseling out on answering her. If you think I am gonna be deterred by your book, spend all night. Oh no, I interrupted. It's just that the party starts at 7. Since you're coming out and all, I just wanted to make sure you'd have a couple of hours to at least scan over it and see if you spot anything major before I finish it. Her eyes narrowed, trying to spot a trick in my answer. If it helps, I said, I can email you the work in progress. Then you could have a few days to peruse it at your leisure, and we can just go over any problems when you get there. That way we'll definitely get to the party on time. So you'll take you to the party? Of course. Why wouldn't I? Hell, you're gonna have to meet them all sooner or later anyway. Might as well be sooner, right? I guess so, she said, suddenly not so sure of herself. Good, I said. Then I'll email you the attachments, and if you've got the time, look at as much of it as you can. Bill the account, of course, so you can get paid. This isn't a favor, you know. Just call or email me when you'll be in town, so I am ready for you. She nodded blankly, her mind wandering. Think I can get a kiss before I go? She walked like a zombie toward me, leaned in, and pecked my cheek. I'll see you Friday, I said. She was standing at the doorway as I left, watching me but not seeing me. Touché. Then I shuddered. What would Kristen and Allie do? Marissa didn't go out of her way either way on Friday. She was the same. Black goth clothes and makeup. The only real change was the long, black trench coat to allow for the chilly weather. Mom, who had never met her, was initially taken aback at her appearance. She quickly settled down, though, when Marissa sat with her for 15 minutes or so and patiently asked for updates on her recovery and better yet. You'll know if you try it with any grandmother her time with little Ben, Dad, who was by now used to Marissa's appearance and, If not comfortable, at least no longer shocked. Just listened to them and smiled, only occasionally interjecting a comment or a question. I sat on the couch next to Marissa and watched them all. Then we disappeared upstairs for an hour and a half, where Marissa proceeded to point out a few major plot holes, character inconsistencies, and problems with the flow of the new book. "Don't get me wrong," she said halfway through the savaging of my hard work. "It's really very good. Probably better than the first one. And I am sure you'd have caught most of this in the initial editing and revision process. So at least I've saved you some time, right?" "Right," I said, knowing I wouldn't have caught half the mistakes she'd found in only 3 days. By 7:15, we were pulling into the Chumley and Darla McWhorter residence, the last in a long line of cars in the packed driveway. Kristen's car was parked right in front of us. Marissa must have seen my hesitation, or the narrowing in my eyes, or, most likely, the way my knuckles turned white as my grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Problem," she said, more than just a hint of sarcasm in her voice. "Just so you're prepared," I said, turning to her. "That's my ex-wife's car there." "You knew she'd be here?" Marissa said, her eyes going wide. I nodded. "She's really good friends with Darla. And you didn't say anything?" I turned back to the car in front of us. "You wouldn't have believed me." She fidgeted, embarrassed I was onto the game she'd played. "Besides," I said, relaxing, "this had to happen sooner or later, right? And with everyone here, pretty much both of our friends, Kristen's and mine, I don't really think she'll do anything." "Maybe this isn't such a good idea," Marissa said. I shook my head. "You're not backing out now. We could go back to your place," she said. "Just watch a movie or something." "Nope." I got out and went around and opened Marissa's door. Marissa, forever quick to open her own door before I had a chance to do it for her, just sat there. "Come on," I said, holding my hand out to her. She didn't move, so I reached down and took her hand, gently pulling her from the car. "Will you relax?" I prodded. "It'll be fine." When Darla answered the front door, her smile at seeing me turned to confusion at seeing Marissa. "Hello, sweetie," I said, leaning in and pecking Darla on her plump cheek. "This is Marissa." "Hey, Tyler," she said, slack-jawed. "Marissa." Marissa tried to smile and nod her head in greeting, but she was just as frozen as Darla. "Where do we put this?" I said, holding out a platter of venison sausage, cheese, and crackers balanced atop a 12-pack of light. Darla snapped out of it, now smiling brightly and taking my arm. "Back here, handsome," she said, leading me through the crowd in the living room and into the kitchen. I felt two things on that long journey of only 25 feet, footsteps and stairs. Marissa's footsteps only inches behind mine, and the silent eyes of my classmates and their significant others on me and my new girl. I managed to smile and nodded all of them on my way to the table covered in appetizers. "Beer or wine?" I said to Marissa once the platter was snuggled between a plate of crudité and a pot of barbecued meatballs and the beer on the porch to stay cold. Marissa's head turned from the crowd, most of whom were now back to chatting with each other, and her eyes met mine. She looked like a deer in the headlights, her eyes unseeing. "Beer or wine?" I repeated. She shook her head. "How about a beer?" Allie said, appearing behind me and holding a bottle of light out to each of us. "Hey, Marissa." Marissa took the beer, nodding at Allie as she did so. "Thanks. Haven't seen you in months," Allie said, to her credit trying to relax Marissa. "I've gotta say, I didn't see this one coming. If anything, I was more afraid of Allie's reaction than of Kristen's." Still Marissa was silent. "So does this mean Tyler's almost done with another book?" "Almost." "Good." Allie hooked Marissa's arm, then turned to me. "I am gonna go introduce her around, okay?" "Sure, Allie," I said, my eyes on Marissa. "Come on, Han," Allie said, pulling Marissa toward a group of women Kristen included talking in the corner. "She's hot," Denikoss said, sidling up behind me and sipping his beer. "Kinda strange looking," Chumley McWhorter agreed to my side. "In a real neat kinda way, though." "Yep, I'd do her." "You'd screw a rattlesnake," I said to both of them. They didn't argue with my assessment. "So she's a vampire or something?" Chumley asked. Marissa was clearly outside his zone, and everyone else's, for that matter. "Goth," I explained. "They call it goth." Over in the corner, Kristen was eyeing Marissa warily, and the rest of the ladies were unsure what to do. Allie was taking the lead, though, prodding all of them into talking. "She got any of them strange piercings?" Chumley said. "Most of them chicks on the internet's got him," Denny agreed, then winced at the notion. "They must hurt, you know?" I turned and looked at both of them, but their eyes were glued to Marissa. Jesus, fellas, simmer down. You didn't answer me, Chumley pressed. Any piercings? Chumley's a plumber, by the way, who must spend his downtime surfing spicy videos on internet. He'd always been something of a perv. Now how would I know something like that? They both looked at me like they didn't believe a word out of my mouth. I just smiled. Jesus, Tyler, Alan Wilkinson whispered as he joined us, sweeping his long brown hair back over his head and out of his eyes. You sure do keep life interesting, huh? What do you mean? I said. First you shag the hottest chick in our class, convince her to marry you, take off to Florida and make a fortune or something, he said, his eyes locked on Marissa. Then you go off and write a book and all, Denny added. Probably bangin' half the hottest beach bunnies in Florida. And now you're back here, Chumley said, taking all the interesting ones before we've had a shot at 'em ourselves. Dude, Alan said, his voice a reverential whisper. You got a 10-inch pecker or something? I just laughed. And across the room, Marissa laughed at the same time, at something Kristen was saying to her. Then all the ladies turned and looked at me. Allie said something, and they all laughed again. Just like that, they were all chatting easily, laughing occasionally. And I saw the dark cloud disappear as Marissa's body relaxed and resumed its loose, gangly demeanor. I smiled. Couldn't have planned it better if I'd tried. So what were you all chatting about and laughing about? I asked Marissa on the car ride home. She was in a bouncy mood, and I knew the night had somehow been a success. Things, she said, giggling, swear to God giggling as she answered. What things? You know, Tyler. No, I don't. That's why I am asking. She turned and looked at me while I drove, then burst out in peals of laughter. Was Kristen talking out of turn? What makes you think it was Kristen? She teased. Allie too? I said. Both of them? And Darla and Christy and Nancy and… Okay, I get the point. Don't be angry, sweetie, she said, brushing my cheek with her fingertips. It was fun. They're nice. I smiled, not sure whether to kill my ex-wife and the rest of them or to buy them all roses for not turning on Marissa like a bunch of sharks. Besides, she said, now I know some of your predilections. Predilections? Predilections, Marissa confirmed, then started snorting as she held back her laughter. You know, like bondage maybe? Ah, Jesus, I moaned. It's not a predilection. Not according to Allie. It was just that once. And it rocked her world, super stud. Anything else? I demanded. Oh yeah, she said. A lot else. Kristen? And Allie. For Chris Sake, I muttered. Hey Tyler, she said, her fingertips now caressing my thigh and creeping toward my package. Yeah, we may be close enough now, maybe know each other well enough, that maybe you'd take me to a hotel now and, try some of these things with me? Then she burst out laughing as she gave my pecker a quick squeeze. Tease, I said, now vowing vengeance on all gossipy, kiss and tell women. She just laughed louder. I can't wait to call Susan tomorrow. Stopped at an intersection, I turned to her. Enjoy your little laugh, young lady. You'll maybe find out about my fondness for spankings. Giving or receiving, she laughed. They didn't really get that far into your past. I couldn't help it. Her laughter was infectious, and I just laughed right along with her. Okay, mine was more of a chuckle, but I'll admit she just took my breath away at that moment. So unguarded. So happy. I felt good, pleased I had some part in her glee, no matter how small and if only as the butt of the joke. And that's when I knew. I was in love with this girl. Me. A soon-to-be, maybe, if the experts were correct. But what do they know anyway? Successful author in love with this weird, wacky, silent, brilliant, incredible amount of food-consuming, goth chick. This lovely young lady with a brilliant smile and an infectious laugh. We had nothing in common except our love of writing and good books. Nothing. Does love really work like this? It sure as hell wasn't like any love I'd ever dreamed of. And would it strike her, too? Would she fall in love with me? That last one that scared me, because now I realized more than ever that I really wanted her to love me. No, just like me, even if it did include hot sex. I needed Marissa to love me. Problem, Marissa said when I answered the phone 3 days later. What? The party, she said. It's next Saturday. Yeah, I confirmed. We're flying out Friday morning. We'll spend Friday afternoon and the following day in Manhattan, go to the party, fly back Sunday afternoon. What's the problem? I can't make it, she said. You what? Can't make it? Why? She was silent. Come on, Marissa, I said. What's the problem? Something's come up is all. What? Just something. Something I can't get out of. I took a deep breath. Since we'd parted Saturday at midday, I've been looking forward to the upcoming mini vacation with Marissa in the worst way. Then can I at least see you before I go? Sorry, she said, barely a whisper. Marissa, what's wrong? Did I do something? It's not you. It's just that, well, something's come up. Can we talk about it? She was silent. Marissa? I am sorry, Tyler. And she hung up. When I tried calling her back, it went a voicemail. I left her a message. Then another message an hour later. 6 messages on Tuesday also went unreturned. By late Wednesday morning, I was frantic. Why don't you get off your butt and go to her? Dad told me. Jesus, you walk around hangdog all goddamn day. Just go to her. Find out what's the matter. I looked at him, then at Mom, who nodded in agreement. So I listened to them. I sat on the stoop outside Marissa's apartment for 3 hours before one of her neighbors came home and saw me there. She's not here, the heavy-set woman said. Took off early yesterday morning. Suitcase in hand. Caught a taxi. Did she say where she was going? Sorry, she said, and her face told me she meant it. I was on the interstate back home, cell phone to ear, when she picked up. Hello? Susan? It's Tyler. She paused, then spoke slowly. How are you? Susan, have you heard from Marissa? She's canceled out on going to New York, won't take my calls, and now I've been to her apartment and… She's with me, Susan said, sadness in her voice. What's wrong? Did I do something? It's not you, Tyler. Then what is it? Susan sighed. I can't really talk about it. Well, can I speak with her? Talk to her? At least say hello? That's probably not a good idea right now. Why? She doesn't want to talk to you. I don't think it would be a good idea to force her, okay? Can you tell me anything? Not now. She paused. Tyler, I am really sorry. I was afraid you felt this way. I will tell you she's not sure how you feel, but I warned her you probably cared for her. I'll tell her that now, okay? Maybe it will make a difference. God damn it, Susan, I said. Let me tell her myself, please. Goodbye, Tyler. I'll call you when I can tell you more. I promise. She disconnected. That's when I got pulled over for doing 80 in a 65. He was an older cop, though, one who'd so obviously been there before and recognized the look on my face. Woman problems? I just nodded, staring straight ahead in a daze. Well, getting your bum killed and probably killing someone else sure as hell ain't gonna solve him now, is it? I shook my head. Sorry. Don't be sorry. Slow the hell down. He walked back to his car muttering. Then a thought struck me, and I spent the rest of the drive home hoping Kristen would be there. What did you guys talk about with Marissa? I asked when we were in my room. Kristen smiled, then grinned broadly. This isn't funny, I said, trying to keep my anger in check. She's taken off. Won't speak to me. By the look of horror on Kristen's face, I knew with a sinking feeling that it wasn't anything she'd intentionally done. We didn't. Everybody was. Just stories, Tyler. Really? You saw us. She was laughing. I nodded. What kind of stories? Kristen dropped her eyes, fidgeting. What kind of stories, Kristen? I insisted. You know, maybe some racy stuff. And some funny stories. From when we were together, and when you were growing up and stuff. I know about the racy stuff, I said. What about the growing up stuff? Just like some of the things we all used to do. You know, the first time you smoked dope and spray painted a mural in your dad's workshop. Stuff like that. I nodded. Nothing about, well, we were nice to her, Tyler, she said, sadness in her face. You saw us. I wouldn't do that to you. I could see how you watched her. And how was that? Like you cared for her. So it was in your own best interest to get something in to maybe put up a little roadblock, right? I didn't. Swear to God I didn't. I wouldn't do that. Her face was frantic, her tone pleading with me to believe her. I just stared at her. Hard. You have to believe me. Sure, I want you to give us another chance. But do you really think I am going to go around sabotaging every relationship you have for that chance? Why wouldn't you? Because then you'll never give me another chance, she said. I know you. You'd hate me even more. I don't hate you, I said, but you don't love me. At least not enough to give us another chance. We've been over this. It's not. I know, she interrupted. But let me tell you what else I know. If you really care about her and I do something, anything, no matter how small, if I do something to get in the way of that, you'll never talk to me again. At least not like you are now. She was right, of course. We've got Ben now, she continued, her voice softening. You think I am going to mess up what we've got right now with Ben? knowing it'll hurt him? You really think I'd risk that? So yeah, I want you back. But I wasn't lying, Tyler. I screwed up. I know that. And I really only want you to be happy. If I can make you happy, and I swear to God I'll try for the rest of my life like never before, well then I want that chance. But I know if I get in the way, you'll resent me for the rest of your life. And I don't want that. I don't want Ben to see his parents hating each other, even a little bit. Not if I can help it. I nodded. She was right. It wasn't anything she or any of the other women had said or done on Friday night. Then what the hell was it? I can tell you something though, Kristen said. What? There was something in the way she looked at you, sometimes at us while we were talking. What? I pressed. She's scared. She looked at you with fondness, almost bordering on puppy love devotion. But there was something more. Like she was scared of that. Of her own feelings for you. Time to quit lying to myself. I'd suspected since talking to Susan, and now Kristen confirmed it. Marissa still didn't trust me. Trust us. She'd been shit on so many times. She was scared of giving it a chance. Her terror of being rejected or hurt was overwhelming any feelings she may have for me. So what do I do now? I was packing Thursday evening, getting ready to get up at 4 the next morning and get to O'Hare for my flight to Manhattan. Lost in my thoughts, I didn't hear the scraping at first. When I heard the thud, though, I went out to investigate. Mom was laying sprawled on the stairway, trying without success to pull herself up by the banister. Mom, I said, rushing down to help her up. Jesus, what are you doing? Where's Dad? We need to talk, she said. Her speech was almost back to normal. The words were clearly enunciated, and most of the pause between words was gone. I'll come downstairs, I said, holding her frail body to mine. No. Her voice was firm, and her expression told me she wanted to get the rest of the way up the stairs. Okay, I said, and helped her the rest of the way with her weak arm around my shoulder. Once in my room, she sat in the chair at my desk and turned to face me. You're hurting, she said. I nodded. Is it Kristen? No, Mom. It's not Kristen. So you've decided then? You're not going back to her? I sighed. Pretty much. Yeah, that's over. She paused, her face upset at first. Gradually, a sense of steely determination set in. Why? Because, Mom, I explained, trying to find words for my feelings and failing. Because she left me. Because she married someone else. But you love her? I thought about it before answering. Sure, I love her. Always have. Then why won't you try? Because, Mom, my love wasn't enough. Mine or hers. It wasn't enough to keep it together. I've seen marriages get past worse. Yeah, but for how long? Have you seen them get past worse and last? Were they happy? Or as happy as they were before? She gave a brief shake of her head. No, they weren't. I've thought about it, Mom. Really, I have. But it's two things. First, she left me. No explanation, no nothing. Just left. And got remarried to someone she was sleeping with while we were still together. I mean, that's pretty major. And you can't forgive that? I shook my head. The problem is that I loved her so much. Really. With every breath I took, I worshipped the ground she walked on. That just makes it way worse, you know? It's so hard to take when you love them so much that you can't even picture them acting like this. And when she did, it just dropped my whole bottom out from under me. Maybe if I didn't love her as much, it wouldn't have been so bad. I could forgive the betrayal and all, but I can't. It's like she didn't love me nearly as much. Mom nodded, her face sympathetic and understanding. I think she'd try now, though. I think she realizes that, and she's doing everything to prove to you she'll love you more than ever before. But I can't trust that. What if we get back together? Will she get bored again? I mean, if she really loved me as much as I loved her, then she'd have never gotten bored with me. Did I mess up? Sure, a lot. I'm not saying it was just her fault. Still, she's the one that left, without a word of warning or explanation. And she's the one that moved on. And to be honest, I think the only reason she's willing to even try now is because we're both back here and Randy's divorcing her. Back with her family and friends and everything, and no Randy anymore. Mom nodded. You said there were two reasons. Ben, I said. Right now Ben's growing up in a one-parent household. He gets to see all of us, but he's used to the way things are. He doesn't really know any better, and by the time he's older he'll have forgotten all about Randy and everything, and it will be all he knows. If I get back with Kristen and it doesn't work out, well, I just can't put Ben through that kind of pain. And you're not willing to take the chance, Mom said, a statement and not a question. No, I am not. You think it's better for him to grow up in a single-parent household than in a normal household? That's not what I think, I said. I just think that the normal household, as you put it, wouldn't last. And I don't want Ben to have to go through that. Kristen and I get along now, and I don't want him to have to go through a divorce and the whole mess associated with it. We sat silent for a few moments. Then it's Marissa, isn't it? Yeah, Mom, it's Marissa. You really care for her, she said. It shows. You're, I don't know, protective, I guess. And you always seem to be leaning toward her. I think I love her. She nodded, her somber face brightening into a smile. Though only half of her lips curled into the smile, she was the mother I'd grown up with. I no longer saw the stroke she'd suffered. She was my mom again. I can see how you would. Not at first, I suppose. But in just those few minutes, I was with her. I saw something. A kindness that's pretty rare. I nodded, not sure how to put my feelings into words. Have you told her? Mom said. That you love her? No. Never really got the chance. Bullshit, Tyler. My jaw dropped. Mom never swore. Well, almost never. But her profanity wasn't in anger. You've had plenty of chances. She's gone. I started to explain. Then find her. Find her and tell her. I know where she is. With her sister. In Florida. But she won't see me. Then figure out a way to get the message to her. Through her sister or something. But how? Mom pushed herself out of her chair, clutching her cane and staring down at me. If you really love her, you'll figure out a way. She slowly covered the few feet to me on the bed. Now kiss your mother for making it all better, and help me down the stairs before I break my neck. Around 8 o'clock that night, I sat at my desk writing my nearly finished second novel. For whatever reason, and don't ask me to explain, I figured out the only way I could get word to Marissa. The only way Susan would have to tell her how I felt. Tyler, a sleepy Susan said on answering the phone. Do you know what time I have to get up in the morning? Tell her I love her, Susan. Don't tell her I care for her. You tell her I love her. Susan paused. Tell her, I insisted. And you tell her, too, that if she's not there Saturday night, if she's not at that party, then I am leaving. This isn't just my book. This is our book. Yours, Marissa's, and mine. And I want all of us to be there to get the credit. But Tyler, Susan started arguing, fully awake now. But Tyler, nothing. I am not going to have the biggest night of my life without the woman I love at my side. So I don't care how you do it or what you do, but you make damn sure Marissa's there. Even if only to tell me to screw off and get out of her life, she'd better be there or I won't be. But you can't do that, Susan argued. You're contractually bound to. I know what the contract says, but I don't care. Screw the contract. Let him sue. What if I can't? Figure out a way, Susan. I am serious. She'd better be in Manhattan by Saturday morning, and she'd better be at that party. But this is, well, it's blackmail. No, Susan, I said, my voice lowering. This is the only way I can figure to tell the woman I love how I feel, and to let her know just how serious I am about it. Mark my words, because I mean every damned one of them. Susan sighed. I'll see what I can do. Thanks, I said, but she disconnected without saying goodbye. The flight was uneventful, and the meetings I was stuck in with publishers, editors, lawyers, and graphic designers were boring beyond belief. Friday night dinner was good, though. Things became somewhat brighter about halfway through dinner when Natalie left the table to take a call. 5 minutes later, she was back, a smile plastered across her face. She'll be here, she said to me. Marissa? Of course, Marissa. Who else? When? Tomorrow morning. Flight gets in at 10. What gate? I said, eager to be there. Natalie shook her head. No way, Buster. You've got more meetings in the morning, and you need to rest up in the afternoon. My eyes narrowed. You're not lying? What good would that do? I am lying, you'll just leave. She leaned over and patted my hand. You just settle down now, okay? Try to enjoy yourself. Maybe pay a little better attention at the meetings tomorrow. Get a nap in the afternoon. You'll see her at the party. You're not lying, I said again, more of a statement this time, like I was trying to convince myself. Ahem, the short little gray-haired fellow at our table said. Yes, Riley, Natalie said to the publisher. This Marissa you're speaking of, he said, his voice higher pitched than you'd think. She isn't, by any chance, the young lady who edited this? Actually found it and got it to you? That's the one, I said. And she's going to be here, he said, looking both surprised and pleased at the notion. She'd better be here, I said. What do you mean, Tyler? If she's not, I started. What he's trying to say, Riley, Natalie cut in, her hand clamped on and squeezing the hell out of my forearm. What he's trying to say is that he feels she deserves the lion's share of the credit. Oh, I don't know, Riley said, smiling at me easily. She didn't write it. You did. So credit, to be sure, but probably not the lion's share, eh? The lion's share, I said. If it wasn't for her, you'd have never seen it. And you've read the final draft I had before she helped with the edit. He nodded. Yes, I will admit it's even better than we expected. And your own final version was already superb. But hers is better, right? He nodded. Noticeably. So the lion's share, I reiterated. Then I'll look forward to meeting her, he concluded, diving back into the duck breast on his plate. I smiled, wondering if he'd still think that when he actually saw her in person. I thought back to the first time I saw her, wondering how I'd ever come to fall in love with that apparition on my doorstep. The party started at 8 on Saturday night, and I was there 5 minutes early. It was in a ballroom at the Waldorf Astoria, and there were giant placards with my picture and with the cover of the book scattered throughout the room. There were also several hundred courtesy copies of the book for the press, critics, and the various literati and celebrities that were expected to attend. I'd spent an hour and a half autographing each and every book. There were already a few dozen people there, mostly milling at the bar or at one of the several tables laden with canapes. I didn't recognize any of them, and I didn't see Marissa. I felt a squeeze on my arm and turned. Susan, I said, leaning over and giving her a peck on the cheek. Congratulations, Tyler, she said, looking around the room then back at me. You should be proud of yourself. Thanks, I said, seeing that she was with someone. A 30-something like me with a square jaw and short-cut light brown hair. No, Marissa. Where's? I'd like you to meet Todd Mueller, she said. We're dating, Todd said, smiling and extending his hand to me. You can say it, babe. Really? We're dating, she said, smiling at him. Tyler Collins, I said, returning the firm handshake. Thanks for coming. And congratulations, too. Susan's a very special lady. He beamed at her, and she returned his look with a warm, easy smile. Don't I know it, he said. We met during a trial a few years ago. She dusted my butt, and then I run into her at the grocery store. A Cuban grocery, no less. Little hole in the wall tucked away in the alley. She patted his forearm. You don't have to tell him the whole story. He shrugged, grinning at her. I just did. Except that we had a drink. Papaya something. And one thing led to another and here we are, Susan said, pecking his cheek. I am happy for you, I said. You deserve it. She gave me a warm smile. And you're the one who kicked me in the butt to give it a shot. I nodded, still looking over their shoulders and around the room, trying to spot Marissa. She'll be here soon, Susan promised. You know how it is. Makeup and traffic and everything. I searched her face for any signs of deception, but she seemed honest and earnest. Tyler, I heard a voice call out. Come over here a moment, will you? I went toward the entrance and saw Riley McMasters standing next to two men I'd seen a million times before in pictures and on the screen. Tyler, he said, I'd like to introduce you to Clint Eastwood and Stephen King. It's an honor, I said, shaking both of their hands in awe. Thanks, Eastwood rasped in that familiar voice. Good to meet you, Tyler, King said as I shook his hand. An excellent book. Really very well done and all. Yeah, Eastwood agreed. Thanks. Really. Coming from you too. I mean, that's really high praise, right? Eastwood chuckled. You don't know why I am here, right? For the party? I guessed. Or someone's going to be here you want to see? He has no clue, King said. Eastwood chuckled. I am the leading partner in Trick Horner. Trick Horner? Now they both chuckled, shaking their heads in disbelief. Trick Horner bought the movie option. Natalie chimed in from behind me. Hello, Clint. Stephen. They both gave her a hug and a peck on the cheek. Natalie, you old battle axe, King said. Still finding the hot up-and-comers, aren't you? When were you gonna come to my agency? She said to him. They all grinned, bantering back and forth. My mind, though, was elsewhere. By 9:30, my jittery nerves were being run ragged. Susan, when confronted, continued preaching patience, but my patience was running thin. I talked with nearly every one of the 200 or so people in the banquet room by then, and I was back with Eastwood and King, now joined by Carl Hyacin, an incredibly talented Florida mystery writer who was one of my favorites. So you're saying this girl, Hyacin said, disbelief all over his face. This Marissa, she's the one who read it and got Natalie to contact you? And edited it, I confirmed. Really, King said. And she's a student? Working on her doctorate in English. Creative writing, too. And Natalie listened to her? Hyacin said. I nodded. She's really good. At the editing, too? King asked. I mean, was it just spelling here in a phrase or something there? No, it was the whole ball of wax. Does she write, too? Eastwood asked, his first words in 5 minutes. Some, I guess, I answered. She wants to. I know that. But she's waiting for some more experience. Life experiences, she says. How is she with dialogue? Eastwood asked. Writing dialogue. How is she? Did you read the book? All three nodded their heads. Like the dialogue? The nods continued. She helped me rework a lot of it. Not totally. Mostly a word here and an inflection there. But it really made a big difference, that's for sure. Hyacinth gave a low whistle. King nodded in thought, and Eastwood just tightened his lips and narrowed his eyes. Holy shit, Hyacinth whispered, coming out of his reverie. What? I said, seeing Eastwood's eyes narrow to smaller slits and King's mouth open in awe. My God, Eastwood croaked. I wish I was 30 years younger. No shit, King agreed. I turned to watch a tall, elegant woman in a simple sleeveless green dress enter the room and look around shyly. Her hair was cut short and parted on one side, the part nearly covering her left eye. A small, matching green handbag was held against her ribs, the only adornment beside the dress, and a simple pair of high-heeled shoes. Marissa, I whispered, amazed at the transformation. You know her? King said. That's her. Hyacinth asked. The editor? You got to work with that? Eastwood said reverentially. Excuse me, I mumbled, walking to her without looking back. She saw me approaching when I was still 20 feet away. Her body tensed, the nervous, searching look now replaced by embarrassment or shame, something like it. Her eyes dropped to the floor, then rose again to meet me. You came, I said in relief. She nodded. You. I didn't recognize you, I said, when you walked in. I had to look a second time. I look okay? Yeah, I said, reaching for her hand. You look okay. Maybe even a little better than okay. Really, she said, because I feel like a Barbie doll. Barbie dolls never excited me before, I whispered in her ear. She smiled, or at least tried to. She was a ball of nerves, though, and her eyes kept shooting to and focusing on the floor. Can we get some fresh air? I said. She nodded, taking my hand and following me to the balcony. Here, I said, draping my suit coat over her shoulders to hold off the breeze on the balcony. Did you mean it? She said, her eyes searching my face as I spoke. What you told Susan to tell me. Did you mean it? That I love you? I said. She nodded. You're damned right I meant it. More than anything in the whole world. I've never been so serious in my whole life. She didn't smile. Instead, her eyes bore into mine and held me there, her face searching for any trace of a lie. I sighed. I'll tell you when I knew it. The second night. Well, not really, but the next day when I was driving home. The second night we spent together, when you wouldn't. You know, the first night was great, don't get me wrong, I explained. But the second night was magical. And the drive home was pure torture because I knew I wouldn't see you again for a couple of days. I realized I didn't want to wait a couple of days. Not even a couple of minutes. But I called you first, she protested. I was afraid to push you. You made it clear you were. What? Reluctant? Not sure. That could just be infatuation, she said. You're describing infatuation. I shook my head. Thought about that already. But it's not. It's like it was when Kristen and I were first together, only stronger. Way stronger. I remember that. I loved her with every breath, but I could still put it aside for other things when I wasn't with her. With you, though, I can't even really think. The book's gone nowhere since that second night. Maybe 10, 12 pages, and they're all shit. I know I am gonna have to rewrite the whole lot of it. Then say it, she said. Say it again. Convince me. I love you, Marissa Key, I said, stepping close and holding her face in my hands, staring into her deep brown eyes as I spoke. I swear to God, this isn't puppy love. This isn't lust or infatuation or any of that. I know. Been there, done that, and that's not what this is. She tightened her lips. Don't try to make yourself believe it, I said. Just believe it. It's a fact, and you need to deal with it. You can't run away just because I want to spend the rest of my life proving every minute of every day of every year that I love you. Her eyes were welling up again in tears, and still she was silent. I love Ben too, I said, but you know that. Not more, not less. In a different way, the way a father loves his son. And my folks too. I love them too. But you? She was nodding now, encouraging me to finish. You, I continued, a gentle smile on my lips. You, I love the way they write books about. The books we both mock. The sappy romance shit. Only it's stronger, more real. I love Ben, but I want his ass out of the house by the time he's out of college, if not sooner. And my folks? Well, I'm already looking for a new place now that Mom's pretty much mended and all. I kissed her, just a light brushing on her tear-soaked lips. I tasted salt and the scent of mint. And me? She whispered. I don't ever want you out of the house. Not unless I am with you. I could spend every waking moment of every day from here to eternity and never get enough of you. You're sure? Damned right I am sure. And in 5 years? Are you still going to feel that way in 5 years? If we play our cards right, it'll only be stronger. Is that a proposal, Natalie? I heard from behind me. Riley, Natalie gasped. You're ruining it. You. Men. Marissa ignored them, instead hugging me close and burying her face in my shoulder. I love you too, she said, more than anything, but I am scared. Is that an acceptance? Riley said. Shush, Natalie hissed. What's wrong with you? If I get you a ring, will you accept it? I whispered into her ear. And will that convince you that I mean it? But I ran away, she said, sniffling. I know, I replied, but I know why you did it. You were afraid. You weren't leaving because of… I don't know. I just know it's not like Kristen. Not like when she left. But still, she said. I've been abandoned, I said. You didn't abandon me. You were scared, so you ran. But you won't do it again, will you? I felt her head shaking in my shoulder. And you really do love me, right? Yes. And now you know that I love you, right? And I mean really know. You know I am telling the truth. I know, she confirmed. So let me say it again, maybe a little more formally this time. Should I get a proper ring and drop to my knees? Or do you just want to elope and get married somewhere? Or am I too soon on all of this? Do I have to wait for the ring before you? You know, she said, pulling back and looking at me. The tears were shining in her eyes, but a joyous and playful smile was curling her lips. You little horn dog, I accused. I think that was an acceptance, Natalie confirmed for Riley. Hours later, entangled on the bed in a knot of naked limbs, Marissa spoke. Can you really believe it? Clint Eastwood wants me to write the script. Help me and him write the script, I corrected her. And only if they actually end up making a movie out of it. Still, she said, Clint Eastwood. And Stephen King still wants you to edit a book for him. I don't know if I want to do that now, she said. Why? Well, I mean, what can I really do? Jesus, Tyler, he's Stephen King. You'll break his heart if you refuse now, I said. She was silent for a moment. What ya thinking? Just wondering is all. About what? I asked. If any of them would have even given me a second look if I'd, well, you know? No, I said, genuinely confused. I don't know. What do you mean? If I'd shown up as Marissa the young, angry, dressed in blue, chick you described for them, I don't think anything would have been different, I said. That's the Marissa I fell in love with. The one I still love. Really? That's the Marissa that snagged me. So I'm sure it would have snagged them too. So this new Marissa, she said, shivering as my fingertip traced the lines of her tattoo. You love her too? Is she the real Marissa? I said. Maybe. I rolled over, propping my head in my hand, and stared at her. Why? Why did you do it? I mean, you look fantastic, but I am gonna love you no matter how you dress or what color makeup you wear. For you, she said. I didn't want to embarrass you. I looked at her. I was never embarrassed. Not once. She smiled. I know. That's why I love you. And why I know I mean really know that you love me too. But this was your night. I wanted it to be about you, not about the nut job editor you were so madly in love with. I smiled. Well, it's nice. The new look? Oh, that too. But no. I was thinking how nice it was that Clint Eastwood lusts after my chick. Think about it. He's a Hollywood star, Dirty Harry for Chris Sake, and he wants my woman. She laughed. And how do you know I don't lust after him, too? Because you're in my suite, in my bed, and excited again, she said, twisting toward me. Did I ever tell you about the 3 things I haven't done yet? What 3 things? Sexually, she said, you know, like those 3 things were for just me and him and no one else, and we'd always know that. What are they? Tell me, I gasped, savoring the feeling as she slowly sank onto me. You'll only find out when we're married. How the hell was I going to concentrate on the rest of my second novel until after the honeymoon? Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.